Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
The head was telling. Nancy opened her eyes and for a long time could not realize where she was. Scant sunlight streamed into the room through the boarded-up window, and it smelled damp and musty. Nancy tried to get up, but found her arms and legs tightly bound with ropes, cutting painfully into her skin. God, what's happening? The girl thought. Where am I? The last thing she remembered was her and her husband celebrating their anniversary and drinking wine. She was pulled heavily into a dream. Frank carefully carried Nancy to the bedroom. And that was it. And now she was tied up in the middle of nowhere, completely helpless, and with no idea what had happened. And she's wiggling her ears, her lips. Somebody help her. The answer was absolute silence. She could only hear some birds flapping their wings and chickadees somewhere above the ceiling. Nancy tried to free herself from the ropes, but the knots were tight. With each movement, the slings only dug harder into her skin. The girl looked around for something to cut the ropes against. But there was nothing in the room except the filthy mattress she was lying on and a couple of boards in the corner. Shit! Nancy burst out. Slowly, she got up on her knees. She was still wearing the red silk dress she had been wearing yesterday. Her hair was tangled and stuck to her face. Yeah, I must look like a scarecrow. What is this place where Frank is? Looking around the room, the girl realized she was in some kind of abandoned house. The walls were covered in plaster, with brickwork peeking through. There was a thick layer of dust and debris on the floor. The remnants of wallpaper were covered with some kind of fungus. Nancy jerked suddenly, her gaze drawn to the window. It was quite high and boarded up, but through them Nancy saw something that could bring her salvation. Glass. There were large shards sticking out along the edge of the inner frame. The girl decided to get to one of them somehow by climbing to her feet. She tried to jump up to the window opening. The first attempt failed. After the first jump, the girl fell to the floor and hit herself painfully. Her legs were bleeding so badly that it seemed impossible to move. Nancy decided to crawl, overcoming her squeamishness, and the girl began to move slowly across the dirty floor towards the window. When she found herself against the wall, she stood up again. This time her legs proved more docile. The bottom edge of the window was at her eye level. The piece of glass was very close and not even blocked by a board, but there was no way for Nancy to reach it. Her hands were securely fastened behind her back. What to do? The girl muttered to herself, "If I can't get rid of the ropes soon, I'm finished." The one who brought me here, apparently, was guided by bad motives. I wasn't just left here to die, so he'll be here soon. I hope she took another good look around the room on her knees. She got into the corner with the boards. There were a couple big rusty nails sticking out of one of them. That's it, rejoiced the girl. The edges looked sharp. We should try to break the rope with them. She turned her back to the boards, sat down on the floor, and carefully began to run her bound hands over the protruding points. She cut her wrist painfully a couple times. The nails were rusty. But the least of Nancy's worries right now was possible infection. The rope had become wet with blood, but that didn't stop Nancy. She kept trying, ripping the cord at least a little bit. But the more she tried, the more it only hurt her skin. Suddenly, her attention was distracted by a knocking sound coming from behind the door. Was someone in the house? Fear and hope mixed in her found head. Not realizing who could be behind the door, kidnapper or savior, the girl crawled back towards the mattress. She was about to try to scream for help when she suddenly heard a familiar voice. The speaker was behind the wall in the next room, and clearly he was not alone. To her horror, Nancy realized it was a man, her own husband. For a moment, the hope that had flared in her soul that Frank had come to save her crumbled. When she made out what she was saying, "You realize you can't leave her like this." Frank's voice sounded agitated. "Of course I understand," a rather low female voice answered him. Nancy did not recognize her husband's interlocutor. The house is abandoned, of course, but there's always the risk that someone might come here by chance. Not likely, though, especially since the building and the room are locked. Even if someone walks by, they won't break in. But what if that idiot comes to her senses and starts screaming for help? We can't take any chances. In fact, I suggest you get rid of her as soon as possible. I don't want any trouble, and neither do you. What do you suggest? Frank asked the stranger excitedly. That, my dear, is for you to decide. You're the brains of the operation. No, I'm not. Clara, you suggested all this. Oh, look at him talk. No, there's no turning back now. Or are you suggesting we just take her home and pretend it never happened? No, shouted Frank. I'm not stupid. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just consulting with you about a way. You realize that we have to do it cleanly so that no one will ever think it was an accident. And we don't have a lot of time. She'll be awake soon enough. And you're right, we can't keep her here forever. Better, on second thought, the woman replied. I have a couple options, but we need time. At least 24 hours. I got a guy I know who's a medical examiner there. We'll have to put your husband in the car and push him off the cliff. I'll get him to write the report. That's right. So what? It's an accident and everything. He knows. He does this kind of work from time to time. You can trust him. God forbid he flies first. I've got a lot of dirt on him. Clara, are you out of your mind? How do you know people like that? And how do you envision this accident? Very simple. Sleeping pills under the knot on the rocking manor driver's seat and parking lot in it, if you want to set fire to it. That for sure for the results of the autopsy, do not worry. The acquaintances will take care of it. All this is dangerous. After a long pause, Frank replied, and what other option to just leave it here? Let him starve to death. And you immediately reported to the police that the wife is missing? No, that won't do. They will find her sooner or later. And the suspicion? They'll understand me. They'll find something to catch me on. We'll work on the accident too, but we just have to be sure. Then we need to make sure no one can find her yet. Well, I'm getting everything ready. At least tape her mouth shut. Nice place you found, by the way. I didn't find a soul around here. The woman laughed suddenly. It has always been here. It's not mine, of course, but no one but me will enter it. Nancy could not believe that her husband's dialogue with this Clara was not a figment of her imagination. This couple is seriously discussing how to get rid of her. Who the hell is this girl? The girl was puzzled. Obviously, she and Frank have known each other for a while. They're planning this whole thing so calmly. And Frank, is he crazy? What did I do to them that they decided to get rid of me so radically? I've got to do something about this, or they'll put their plans into action. Just now, I'm like a mouse in a cage. The voices died down. Nancy nervously listened to the silence. Her heart pounded wildly, and frantically went over in her head the options to buy time. So this woman had said it would take her a couple days to get everything ready. Frank seemed to agree to that. So I might have time, but they're afraid I'll wake up and call for help. There were footsteps outside the door. Someone was about to enter the room. Suddenly, it hit Nancy. She would have a ghostly chance if she tried to play dead. Since she had fainted last night, her husband must have used some kind of drug to put her to sleep. It was possible to fake poisoning. The girl bit her tongue hard. After a couple seconds, her mouth filled with blood. She lay back on the mattress, tilting her head slightly to the side to let the blood flow from the corner of her mouth. For several years, Nancy had gone to yoga, where she had mastered breathing practices. One of them allowed her to put herself into a kind of trance by slowing her heart rate dramatically. It was going to work. The girl froze and began to take a series of deep breaths. A key turned in the keyhole. Nancy's eyes were closed, so she could not see who had entered the room. All her attention was now focused on her breathing. She took one last deep breath and froze. Thoughts were wandering somewhere outside of her mind. Clara entered the room and saw the girl lying motionless on the mattress. Looking closely at her, the woman noticed blood oozing from the corner of her mouth. No shit. Clara burst out. She walked over to Nancy and listened to her breathing. The girl wasn't breathing. Clara set her lip down. She reached up to her captive's neck and tried to feel for a pulse. It was absent, though the body was still warm. Clara shook Nancy by the shoulders, but she didn't react just fine. Hey, Frank, come here. Frank entered the room with a heavy gait. He looked around and didn't immediately realize why his friend had called him. "Honey," Clara said worriedly, "I don't even know whether we have one less or more problem now." "What do you mean?" The man was surprised. "Your spouse passed away. See for yourself." Frank's face showed confusion. "How could she die? Are you sure?" "Yes." Clara was quick to assure him. "Not breathing. No pulse, blood coming out of her mouth." "What did you give her last night?" "I gave her a horse dose before the sleeping pills. It shouldn't have been. Your fiancé must have some kind of individual intolerance." "But if you remember." "I don't remember anything," Frank argued resentfully. He looked at Nancy's breathless body. For a moment, it seemed to him that she had returned. He pushed Clara away and began to feel his wife's pulse himself, but there was no heartbeat. "What's there to check? Don't you believe me?" Clara was angry. "Obviously hell. Your little girl threw herself. That's it. At least it's easier for us not to get our hands dirty. Just put her in the driver's seat. It's a piece of cake. In the meantime, I think we can leave her here. She's not going to call for help, no matter how many bands she's got." Frank stood there paralyzed. Despite everything that had happened recently, he had once loved his wife dearly, and now to see her dead. Realizing he'd had a hand in it, it was wild. But Clara was right. The body could be left here for the time being without worrying about it being discovered so quickly. Frank shook himself out of his daze. "Okay, what do you say?" Quietly he answered Clara. "Let's at least cover it with something. Just to be safe." Clara went into the next room and brought out a couple of dirty cotton coats, tossing them carelessly on Nancy. She left the room. Frank took one last look at his dead wife and followed. Nancy heard a car pull away from the house. While her captors were in the house, she was afraid to even begin to breathe, let alone move. Her whole body ached unbearably. The wounds on her arms were badly posterior, though the blood had already stopped flowing. The cotton batting Clara had covered her with stank horribly. When Nancy took her first breath, she nearly vomited. As she struggled to get out from under them, she finally tried to regain her breath. Now she thanked God that she had decided to take up yoga and mastered this difficult breathing technique, slowing her heartbeat to a lower limit. If Frank and Clara had been a little more persistent, they would have waited for another heartbeat. But Nancy had been lucky. Either the kidnappers were scared, or they were just very willing to take the expected for granted. But now the girl had time on her hands. She remembered that a couple of scoundrels had mentioned near the house. Rarely, but still people showed up. "So I just had to stand under the window and watch for passersby. The problem was that from the high window there was nothing to see. And Nancy had no strength left to stand for hours waiting for rescue. She was unbearably thirsty, and the kidnappers had not even left her any water, for the corpse had no need of it. Nancy tried again to cut the ropes, but the long weave did not give in. Besides, the wounds started again. Abandoning these attempts, the girl tried to look at the problem from the other side. If it is not possible to break the ties, you can try and bend, and try to pull the hands forward. It was the wrists that were bound. Thanks to all that yoga, Nancy was quite flexible. She'd seen a couple of movies where characters had done such tricks, but she'd never tried it herself. Nancy strained her ligaments and twisted her joints as hard as she could. By some miracle, she succeeded. When the girl saw the bound hands in front of her, she cried with joy, despite the fact that all the skin was covered with deep scratches and abrasions. Now the only thing left to do was to somehow try to untie the knot. Nancy tried to do it with her teeth, but the rope was synthetic, and the knot itself was too tight and tangled. Only now the girl realized why the nails were slipping so persistently, but she managed to free her legs. For some reason, they were not as securely fastened as the arms. Nancy experienced inexpressible relief when finally left her ankles. The rope was now covered with gruesome welts. Frank was probably the one who tied up his wife, not the least bit sorry for her when he intended to immobilize her, and pity me, Nancy reasoned. If they're going to send me to the other world, they certainly wouldn't think twice about a couple of bruises. The question is another. Why on earth would they intend to get rid of me? Nancy really didn't understand. With Frank, they had already been married for 6 years. There hadn't even been a single more or less serious quarrel in that time. Their only point of disagreement was that the girl didn't want to have children. At first, Frank thought that she was simply not ready. But during the 3 years of married life, he realized that Nancy was firm in her convictions. She didn't see herself as a mother at all. She didn't get a thrill from all kinds of cradles, rattles, strollers, and videos from the net with funny babies. And the sight of mothers walking their offspring in the yard caused disgust. Frank, on the other hand, dreamed of an heir. A couple of times there were conflicts, the right out of which always came out Nancy. She managed to convince the spouses in their views for a time he really accepted them. But some time passed, and Frank again raised the subject. He even tried to tamper with his wife's birth control pills. When Nancy found out about it, she didn't start a scandal. She just did. She went to the hospital and got an IUD inserted. There was nothing the husband could do about it. Gradually, the baby talk stopped. Frank just accepted that his wife was like that and hoped that one day the maternal instinct in her will still take over. But the girl doubted that the unwillingness to have children was the cause of the crime. It was much easier to divorce and find a suitable woman, or even take one with ready offspring. Especially Frank wouldn't have had any trouble with that. The guy was damn good looking, educated, well-mannered, quite well-to-do. Such men, as she liked to say, found a friend Alice on the row is not lying. Could it be money? A year ago, Nancy became the owner of a huge fortune, inherited from her grandmother. When she learned that the last will of the deceased was to leave her only granddaughter a collection of paintings, she was not particularly happy. Classical painting she was not particularly interested in a few dozen canvases, and hang especially nowhere was. Therefore, after consulting with Frank, Nancy decided to sell the paintings. The couple ordered an examination to at least roughly understand how much all this could cost, and were completely unprepared for the result of the evaluation. The most ordinary landscapes turned out to be unknown works by famous artists. Only the starting price of the collection at the auction was up to a couple of $100 million. It was even frightening to imagine how much the buyers would be willing to pay for it by the end of the auction. Nancy was shocked. Frank quickly realized that such a gift of fate could significantly improve the quality of their lives. One of the paintings was sold to a Chinese millionaire. There was no limit to the joy of the couple. The husband, delighted with the success, proposed to auction the entire collection. But Nancy, on reflection, declined. It seemed to her that in the painting's capital will be safely insured, and with such a demand for Russian painting for a few years will grow significantly in value. Frank seemed to accept her decision, but it was noticeable that he was upset. He could not wait to make a favorable deal and to do something more ambitious than to blow dust off the old paintings. But his wife was adamant. It seemed to her that the money received from the sale of one painting, quite enough for a comfortable life and any investment. She quietly gave the entire proceeds of Frank on his personal projects. The rest of the paintings went into a bank vault until better times. Nancy could not even imagine that this would push her husband into crime. In fact, the inheritance was her property. Frank had no rights to it. In the event of a divorce, he would get nothing. The death of his wife is another matter. He would have been the sole heir, and all problems would have been solved. But the other thing is more important. Who was this woman Clara? For all the time of their life together, the girl did not even allow the idea that her husband could have a mistress. Frank behaved as an exemplary husband, and everything indicated that he loved his wife, as well as she him. He tolerated her whims, even if they contradicted her views. He was never absent for long periods of time. Even with these paintings, he gave up easily enough. Had he only pretended, and already in his mind a plan had been born for Nancy to shake off these thoughts. So she said aloud, something had to be thought of right away. Those two could come back at any moment. There was no precious time to lose. Her bound hands were in the way, but the circulation in her legs was already fully restored. Nancy went to the door and held the handle. It was padlocked shut. The door looked pretty sturdy. Nancy, with her frail build and partial immobility, was not going to be able to kick it open. That left the window. The girl went to it, stood on tiptoe, looked through the gaps in the boards. In front of the house, there was a rather vast wasteland, piled with boards of wood from time and dampness. Next to the pile of rotting wood stood a rusty Soviet-style truck. Some kind of old bathtub filled with dark water. Nancy's gaze came upon a fence. It was wooden, but quite high. Where the boards were missing, you could see the road through them. As Nancy stood at the window, 2 cars passed by. She tried to call for help, but the road was too far away, and through the open window her voice was unlikely to penetrate the street. Nancy, powerless, sank to the floor. She was beginning to lose hope. Besides, she was tormented by an intense thirst. The girl realized that a little more and she would die a quite natural death of despair. Large tears rolled from her eyes. Without knowing it, Nancy fell asleep. She was awakened by a noise outside. Startled, the girl quickly jumped up and went to the window. There was someone walking around the house. It was already dusk outside, so she had to look for a long time, and the girl heard a man's voice. "Who are the owners?" "Jesus." Nancy's heart was pounding. "People, we have to get your attention right away." "I'm here," shouted the girl with all her might, coming close to the window. "Help! For God's sake, help! I'm inside." The man who was walking around the house apparently did not hear her. Nancy began pounding on the boards with her bound hands and kept calling for help. At some point, her cries got through. "Woman, are you all right?" The man's voice got louder. He must have realized where the sound was coming from, screaming at the top of Nancy's voice. "I'm begging you, help me." The man walked straight to the window. The girl saw through the slits his face. It was a rather elderly man with glasses. He met Nancy's eyes. "Girl," he began, "are you here alone? Are you in trouble? For God's sake, help me out. The house is locked and my hands are tied. You can try to break the door down. The front door is iron. I'm afraid it won't work. Isn't there another way in? I don't know." Nancy started crying. "We have to hurry. They could come back at any moment." "Who are they?" asked the stranger. "It's a long story." Nancy interrupted him hurriedly. "Please find a way to help me get out, or they will kill me." The man's face showed confusion. He could see that the girl was not joking. "You just don't worry." He hastened to reassure Nancy. "I'll get around now. The house will look for another entrance. The room I'm in is locked too. You can break the door. It's wooden. It opens inwards." The man stepped away from the window. Nancy was afraid he would leave her here, preferring not to get involved. She shouted after him not to leave, but the stranger was no longer visible from the window. "Shit," the girl cursed to herself. "If only he would come back, and then I'm saved." After a few minutes, the man came to the window again. "The girl," he said, "I went to the car to get a tire iron. There's another door on the other side of the house. There's a padlock on it. I'll try to break it off. Just don't worry, please." "Okay," Nancy said and sank heavily to the floor. Soon she heard a metallic clanking sound. Apparently a man was trying to dislodge the lock. It took him a moment, after which he quickly reached the door. The handle lingered, and Nancy tore towards the entrance. "I'm in here," again she shouted. Okay, step away from the door. I'll try to kick it open." Nancy obediently stepped farther away. It took the man a few blows before the door began to give way. After another minute, the man fell out into the room with a crash. Nancy shrieked, "Are you all right?" Concernedly, she asked the stranger as he, affected, rose from the wreckage. "It's nothing," soothed the girl. "What happened to you? Why are you bound? I'll tell you everything. But I beg you, let's get out of here as soon as possible." "All right, let's go," agreed the man. He saw the poor condition of his new acquaintance, so he saw no reason to delay. "I have a car not far away. Can you walk?" "I think so," answered Nancy. Now she was ready even to run. "There's just one little problem." "What's that?" Nancy's chest tightened. "I have a flat tire. I thought I'd go to the owners and ask for a jack." There was a look of panic on the girl's face. When the man saw it, he hurried to reassure her. He saw that she was terrified at the thought of having to stay in this house. "Don't worry, we'll just drive a little way and then we'll figure it out." They left the building and headed for the gate. Nancy saw the house from the side of the dilapidated and brick building hollow ethereal roofs, an abandoned lot with scant vegetation. Half the yard was drowned in nettles. Broken glass and stakes, ceramic tiles were lying everywhere. I wasn't sure if anyone lived here, the man explained as they walked along. But there's no houses around here, just this one. And as luck would have it, I got a flat tire. Now we'll sit down, I'll give you a rope. The car was about 100 meters from the fence. It was a pretty decent SUV. The stranger helped Nancy into it. He pulled out a large hunting knife from somewhere and with confident movements cut the thick cord into one. His hands were in a terrible state, but nothing caused them now. It would have to be treated. The cuts look pretty deep, he remarked. Nonsense. The girl tried to smile. Please, let's get out of here quickly. Then all that handling on a flat tire. It wasn't easy to drive. The driver tried to do it carefully. Luckily, after a couple of kilometers, they came to a gas station. Got a jack. The man got a spare tire from the trunk and changed it quite quickly. Oh, it's hard, he said, getting in the car. The old tire's a goner, of course, but the rim's intact, so it's all right. So now tell me where to take you. I live out of the way, hopefully in a classroom. Where is she supposed to go exactly? She can't exactly go home. Frank's there with that horrible woman. Neither can she go to her acquaintances. Now the girl suspected everyone in general to the police, that she will say that her husband with an unknown woman and kidnapped her. And where's the proof? Seeing that the girl is confused, the man decided to take the initiative. So he began. Let's start by introducing ourselves. My name is James, Nancy muttered, and the girl is Nancy. James said thoughtfully, what a rare name that is nowadays. That's what Nancy is. I think you're hungry. Let's go somewhere and you can tell me all about it. Nancy gladly agreed. She hadn't eaten in 24 hours. She was so thirsty that it was hard for her to speak. They stopped at a small roadside eatery. The girl immediately went to the restroom, leaving her companion to order at his discretion. She would eat an elephant right now. The restroom shone with whiteness. Nancy was even surprised. She thought places like this were unsanitary, and the tiles were scrawled with all sorts of obscene writings. She went to the mirror and was horrified at the absenteeism. Her face was in front of dried blood, her hair was tangled, mascara stains were visible under her eyes. The girl put her hands under a stream of cool water. The wounds immediately began to sting unbearably. She thoroughly washed everything with soap at Soap Her Face. Only now the girl realized that she was completely barefoot. The shoes she had been wearing the day before had been left in that horrible room. How could I go barefoot and not even notice? There was glass and rocks everywhere in the yard. It's called shock. She asked her reflection in the mirror. Thank God, there are almost no people. I don't look so bad. Nancy went out into the hall, where James was waiting for her. His order had already been brought to him. The girl hurriedly sat down at the table so that no one would see her bare feet. James, guilty, she began. I don't even know how to say it. I don't have any shoes. Really? Surprised man and looked under the table. You need to fix that right away. I have some old sneakers in my car. If you don't mind putting them on. Let me get them now, and then we'll go to the store and find something more suitable. A couple minutes later, he came back with a pair of teenage sneakers. Nancy immediately put their shoes on. They fit. My grandsons, the man explained, smiling. They bought him new ones, but he kept them. I'm an old school man. I was sorry to throw them away. I thought they might come in handy. As you can see, my instincts were right. Your instincts don't fail you in principle. If you hadn't been at that unfortunate house today, I dread to think what would have happened to me. And Nancy told James everything that had happened since last night. Yes, the man thought, there's no getting out of it. You realize you can't go home. Worse, they'll come back. They'll see that you're missing, and they'll start looking for you. They'll be driven by fear of exposure. And the intruders will realize that you won't go to the police because of the lack of evidence. What am I supposed to do? I can't even go to my best friend's house. Frank will look for me there first. I don't have any parents, only a grandmother, but she died a year ago. That's what James said, looking Nancy straight in the eye. I know my proposal will seem strange, since this is the first time you've seen me. But I can't leave you in the lurch. You can stay with me for a while, and I'll think of a way to bring your abusers to justice. You know they can't go unpunished, and you must go on with your life without fear of going out into the street. Nancy was visibly embarrassed. She was frightened not by the fact that she had to accept such a proposal from a stranger, but by the very fact that she would have to invade someone else's life so brazenly. I can see your doubts, Nancy. James was quick to reassure her. Don't worry, you won't be a burden to me at all. I have a big apartment. I live with my cat and my son. He recently divorced his wife. He's staying with me for now. He can't live alone. And Liam, my grandson, is safe to see. His wife, the former Cindy, lets him go to his grandfather's house without question. You'll get to know each other. It won't be boring. And my son is a smart guy. He'll help you understand your complicated situation. He used to work in the organs, but he left because he couldn't bear to see how the law actually works in our country. He had a keen sense of justice that was shattered by the bureaucracy. James, thank you so much. I don't even know how to thank you. I'll take you up on your offer because I have no other choice. I have no phone, no money. I don't even have the keys to my own apartment or papers. I have a spare key, but I'm afraid to go to her place. That's good. The man was happy. You'll come to your senses, and then we'll think about it. Sergei's apartment really turned out to be a huge good quality with good repair. When Nancy stepped over the threshold, a huge striped cat ran out to meet her and began to rub her feet intensively. Meet him, laughed James. This is Benedict. I hope you're not allergic, because he's taken a liking to you. That rarely happens. He'll never leave his side now. As if in confirmation of his master's words, the kitten gave an affirmative meow. Nancy laughed. Don't worry, she assured James. I love cats. My grandmother and I were Siamese. He followed me everywhere, even walked me to school. And he was so smart. Sometimes I used to swear at how human he was. Yeah, they can do that. Not all of them, though. Come on, I'll show you around. Peter's not home yet. He's away for a couple days for work. So don't be shy. The host led the guest through the rooms, showed her a bedroom where she could make herself at home. After the tour, Nancy asked to take a bath. James had prepared some clothes for her, apparently belonging to his son. I don't think Peter will be too upset to part with a couple of shirts. James winked at her. Nancy finally relaxed into the hot water. She could only now feel how exhausted her body was. After being in the tub for almost an hour, the girl went into the kitchen. Flavored tea was waiting for her. Here's Nancy, James told her. Walked to the table, serving jam. I made cherry jam myself this morning. Oh, really? Nancy was surprised when she tasted a spoonful of jam. It's delicious. Yes, I have my own cherries. We have a whole orchard outside the city, laughed James. And cooking is my hobby. I used to always fight with my late wife, who will stand at the stove, cook all these berries and vegetables. But I can't help it. I like it. And she herself admitted that I'm better at it. It's rare to get a man to do all that, isn't it? Nancy thought. She and Frank used to buy everything ready-made. Their grandmother used to supply them with jam. Since she was a child, Nancy had loved to watch her work with berries over a huge copper basin. And then they would roll the jars together. The girl was always waiting for her grandmother to be distracted, so she could take advantage of her absence and savor the hot, sweet treat. There's no way to force it. It's a passion, James continued. Some are into fishing, some are into soccer, and I'm into jam. We are all different. Benedict suddenly appeared and jumped on Nancy's lap. The girl began to rub him behind the ear, which made the cat make deep trumpet sounds. It sounded more like a running tractor than a purr. After sitting with James in the kitchen for a while longer, Nancy excused herself to go to bed. The bed, though small, was very comfortable. The blanket helped her fall asleep immediately. The next morning, Nancy woke up well-rested, no one bothering her. When she glanced at her watch, she was greatly surprised. It was already 12 o'clock. A normal girl would get up around 9. She got dressed and left the room. James she found in the living room. The man was sitting at his laptop. "Oh, Nancy, good morning," greeted James. "How did you sleep? Good morning." Nancy smiled. "Everything is just fine. I don't usually sleep this long. It's a normal reaction to stress. The body has to get its energy from somewhere to recover. Have you been stressed out a lot? Let me feed you breakfast." Nancy readily agreed. James made scrambled eggs and toast, and the deliciously brewed coffee chased away the remnants of sleep. "And now, Nancy." Sighing, James began, clearing the table. "Tell me, why was your hubby going to do such a terrible thing? You must agree, it is not the most common practice to do such a thing because of disagreements. You can always get a divorce. It's not my business, of course, but I would like to have a full picture to help you move on." Nancy took a long time to collect her thoughts. When she told James about her misadventures, she hadn't gone into much detail, nor was she herself 100% sure of her suspicions. However, the explanation with the inheritance turned out to be the most logical, so she hurried to share the assumption with her savior. "I think," she began, "it's all about the paintings. I received an inheritance from my grandmother a year ago. At first I thought all these landscapes were just old junk, but Frank insisted on an appraisal. It turned out I was the owner of a multi-million-dollar fortune. What are these paintings?" James wondered. "My grandmother told me that these paintings used to belong to my grandfather. I didn't know him at all. He died when I was 2. My grandfather was a collector of paintings, but our family had never been wealthy. I can't imagine how he could have gotten such expensive paintings. As the expert said, some of them belong to the brushes of very famous Russian artists, but belong to the early periods of their work or to the so-called gift works. This is when the author wrote for his friends, and the paintings never made it beyond private collections. I wonder where your grandfather got such a treasure. We'll never know. But after he died, it all went to my grandmother, and then to me. Frank really wanted to sell it all at once to invest in some project of her own. I never took much interest in the details of my husband's work. You should have. We sold one painting. He invested the money right away. He always made good money. My questions were just dismissed. Once he tried to show me the mechanism of work, but to me all these figures and graphs always seemed like gibberish. I'm a pure humanitarian. Any formulas put me in a state of unbearable boredom. But then I was afraid to risk and said that the paintings will sell only as needed. Where are they now? They're all in a bank vault. Frank doesn't have access to them. And anyway, you see, if we divorced, he'd get nothing. My death would solve all his problems. I don't know. It would have been a lot easier to convince me to hang it up at home and order good copies, gradually replacing the originals. I never would have even suspected anything wrong. But I guess my husband wasn't that smart or didn't have the money. And the woman he was with at the time, I have absolutely no idea who she is or what kind of relationship they are in." Well, James thought, it shouldn't be too hard to find out. We already know her name and that she meets your husband from time to time. And that house, you say? She said she used to go there a lot, so we can run the owners. Yeah, but she said she didn't own the house. That's okay. Either way, the owner has something to do with her. Relative, friend, neighbor. Any information you can get. Leave it to me, please. Believe me, I have some experience in this sort of thing. Really? Nancy was surprised. No, I'm not a private detective or an agent. James laughed, seeing her reaction. I just feel it's my duty of honor to bring villains to justice. I'm former military. Really? I'm not surprised, though, seeing as how you kicked the door down with a couple of punches. No, it was just the wood was sticky enough. If I'd been younger, I could have broken it down with one. What do you think, James? Nancy asked after a moment's thought. They've already discovered I'm gone. It's not impossible, the man thought. Even if they have, they're panicking now and trying to figure out where they've gone. Given the broken door, it wouldn't be hard to guess that someone helped. The other thing is, does it realize you're still alive? And I did a pretty convincing job of playing dead. They might think someone just took my body. They might think that, James nodded. If they do, we have a chance to play the game with them, but on our terms. But we'll have to wait for Peter. I'm sure he'll be happy to help us. In the meantime, I don't recommend you leave these walls. There's a risk you might run into someone on the street and they'll pass it on to Frank. I agree, and I don't really need to go anywhere. Peter arrived the following evening. Nancy and James were having dinner in the kitchen when the owner's son came in. He was a fairly young tall man with blonde hair and bright blue eyes. Nancy didn't even think there was such a rich color in nature. "Hi, Daddy," he greeted, catching a glimpse of the girl. "I see you have company. Why don't you introduce yourself?" "Yes, son, come in. We're having dinner." James fussed. "This is Nancy, Peter." The guy extended his hand, which she shook firmly. Peter noticed that her wrists were marked with a creepy-looking scar. "Long time to come," his father interrupted him. "Don't get the wrong idea. This girl is in trouble, and you and I have to help her." "How was it?" Peter asked with suspicion in his voice as he continued to stare at Nancy. "What happened?" I wondered. "I was robbed at the train station. I had nowhere to go." Nancy couldn't answer for some reason. She felt ashamed. For some reason, she thought her savior's son would not be happy to see her in his own home as an embarrassed girl. James came to the rescue. The son said sharply Peter and immediately changed his expression. "What, do you think I dragged all the beggars into the house? You know me, I offered Nancy to stay with us for a while. I rescued that girl from an abandoned house a few days ago, tied up and scared to death, and I feel it's my duty as a man to help her deal with her abusers." "In what way is that related?" Peter interrogated. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "She wants to send me to the other world, in fact," Nancy said in a low voice. Peter was silent. He saw that the girl was serious, and from her wounded arm she confirmed her father's words. So Peter rested his hands on the edge of the table. "Let's be more specific." Nancy repeated her story again, mentioning the paintings as the most probable motive for the crime. Now she herself thought the whole story was a bit crazy. But after listening to the end, Peter suddenly became interested. "So I take it you're not going to go to the police?" "So no proof other than my word." And that's true. I was an investigator myself for a few years. I'd take a statement, but I don't think I'd make a case. The only thing left to do is either try to catch them red-handed, which is almost unrealistic, given that it would put you at great risk, or play a little with them. James suggested as well. Nancy laughed. "I can tell you're his son." "Very interesting." Peter looked at his father. "What kind of game are you playing, Dad?" "We think James has taken a fancy to us. We think they're convinced Nancy's dead and someone's found her body. So maybe we should blackmail them a little bit. Might work?" Peter scratched his chin. "They're probably panicking and won't go anywhere. But we have to get as much information as we can." "You know," Nancy suddenly exclaimed, "I have a friend named Alice. She's a very nice girl. I don't think she's in cahoots with them. I'm afraid to go to her myself. I don't know if Frank will be there waiting for me. But if you talk to her, Peter, she might be able to help." "Okay, I'll keep that in mind." The next day, James got information about the owners of the abandoned building where he'd found Nancy. The house belonged to a Sophia. It wasn't hard to find this woman. Peter involved old acquaintances, and in a couple of hours he had the data. The guy volunteered to personally drive to the old lady's house and make inquiries about Clara. The address was a nursing home. Peter introduced himself as the woman's grandson. Luckily for him, no one asked for any documents. A nurse escorted him to the room where Sophia lived. When Peter entered, the nose was hit by the acrid smell of medicines. The old woman was sitting at a desk reading something. Peter was sharing. "Sophia, hello," he said loudly. The woman shuddered and looked up at him, her eyes hidden behind thick glasses. "Good morning." She greeted him with a well-pitched and surprisingly young voice. She was 86 years old according to her documents. "I'm sorry, I don't recognize you. My eyes don't look the same. Come closer." "Sophia, my name is Max. I'm here at Clara's request. I brought you some fruit." Peter put a heavy bag on the table. "The old lady has been sitting on her hands for a long time and she hasn't shown up. She's doing well. Yes, Sophia, Clara is working very hard. She has no time. She asked me. How could I refuse? We've been friends since we were kids, since school. The old lady asked me again. I don't remember you. Max, you say you're not Livingston. By any chance? No, no, Peter immediately sensed some kind of trick in the tone of the interlocutor. Sonsiv. But Clara and I didn't go to the same school. If that's what you mean, I think I've softened. Sophia, I seem to remember all my students, but I don't recognize you. My eyesight, you know, is no longer the same. But I recognize every single one of my Cossacks, no matter how much time has passed. Cindy, she's one of the few people who visits me here. You'd think she'd have forgotten the old woman by now and lived in peace. No, she can't be like that. The girl's so kind to her. She's always been different from the others. It's been 21 years since graduation, and she's always with flowers and sweets. The nurse comes running to me. She only manages to grumble again, saying that your Clara came and raised everyone's ears. But I smile. I'm just glad that I taught such a smart girl. Good for you. Peter nodded to himself, thinking how cruelly mistaken this woman was. If she knew what her former student was doing, probably would not smile. Now weakened by a heart attack, no less. And you say you went to another school. Yeah, 32nd, nodded Peter. Oh, so it's right next door to ours, the 17th. Yes, it's a pity you didn't get into my class. They were my last class. I retired as soon as they graduated. And now, you see, I've fallen apart. Nobody needs me. Peter spent some more time in the old woman's company, but he could not learn anything useful, although the information he got from Sophia could be useful. Leaving the nursing home, he dialed the number of his friend from the authorities. Mish, he began quickly. Listen, it is urgent to run a person through. Don't ask anything. It'll count for something later. Oh, there was a cheerful voice on the other end of the line. But then he heard a serious matter. Write it down. Clara, age 37-39 years. Registered in the Bright Street. Probably a different address now, but she used to live there. I don't know much data. Please check life and death issues. I know yours. You probably picked up another hottie from death, didn't you? Now you're looking for where she lives so you can wait with flowers. Peter, stop being a romantic. I already divorced one of them for that. Find yourself a good woman, a good housewife, and live in peace. Mike, all wrong, started Peter, but in time realized that it is not worth explaining that the curious comrade is not worth it. Okay, let's as the data will be dialed immediately. I'm listening and obeying, Mike sneered. The former colleague called back in an hour. He dictated to Peter 3 addresses for a woman with such data. Yes, Peter thought, 3 isn't much, but it's not a lot. Considering I have no idea what this Clara looks like. All right, well, there's no traffic. Let's run down each of them. To the first address. Door was opened by a haggard-looking woman. She was in her early 60s. Good afternoon, greeted Peter. I can see Valeria. Are you for pennies? Tiredly asked the hostess. I started to Peter, but the woman was already pulling him out into the hallway. Clara got worse today. I woke up in the morning. She is lying on the floor. She must have tried to get into the stroller herself. The stroller. That's what Peter said. Yes, in a wheelchair. Didn't you know that? She's been disabled since she was a child. She can't walk since the accident, but she's still trying to get up. I'm sorry. I tried to free Peter from the woman's clutches. I must have made a mistake. I need Clara. The woman looked at him, flapping her eyes. Suddenly, it was as if she woke up. Oh, I thought, I'm sorry to drag you in like this. Didn't even recognize anything. Is it mine, Cindy? Peter went to the second address, but the stern man at the door said that Valerie no longer lives here 3 years moved to the States. He had one last address left. The house was located right next to the school number 17 mentioned by Sophia. But that should be a sure hit, Peter thought. But if it really is the same woman, he should be more careful. Tales of schoolmates won't fly. Peter pressed the bell button several times, but no one came to the door. He had already decided to come back later, when suddenly the door opened and a middle-aged woman looked out of the apartment. She asked him in a disgruntled tone, I'm sorry, Peter was confused, and I must have woken you up. My name is Max. I've just been to see Sophia, your teacher. Oh my God. Clara was worried. Something's happened to her. She had a heart attack yesterday and was composing Peter. She's fine now. They couldn't reach you for some reason? I'm next on the list. I talked to her today. She really asked me to come and see you. I'll be right there." It was obvious that Clara was very concerned about the old lady. It bothered Peter a lot. He couldn't understand how she could be so caring and cruel at the same time. "Did you also study with her? Or a relative? I just don't remember her having grandchildren." "I'm a distant relative," lied Peter, on my mother's side. "I don't live here, so I don't get to visit her much." "Oh, don't worry, they won't let you see her today anyway. I brought everything. She just said to ask where you've been." "You mean you haven't visited in a while?" "Yes," Clara sighed. "It's just the way it is. I've had a lot of problems of my own. I'm so sorry. I'll be sure to visit her one of these days." Peter said goodbye to the woman, who seemed very tired. It was obvious that Clara hadn't lied about her problems, except that Peter knew very well what kind of trouble the woman was in. Well, now he knew where she lived and what she looked like. He made the decision to sit in the car and observe her. Realizing that the woman wouldn't get out that easily, he decided to get active. He dialed the number Frank had given him from Nancy. A man's voice answered unfriendly. "Hello, Frank," Peter began. "Your wife, or rather, her body?" There was silence on the other end of the line for a long time. Frank must have digested what he heard. "What do you want?" He finally squeezed out. "How much money for silence?" $3 million. Peter said it at random. "Are you crazy?" "I don't have that amount." "What made you think you had my wife?" "It wasn't that hard to establish. And don't think that if you don't pay, you'll get off easy. I have footage of your car being at the scene for quite some time." "The time of the girl's death fits right in that gap," sighed Peter. "Let's skip the details, especially now you've asked me what I want. So you really know what I'm talking about. Are you from the police?" Frank suddenly asked. "No," Peter laughed. "If I were the police, we'd be talking differently." "Okay, but I need proof. Can you send me a picture of the body?" "Sure, it'll take me a while. I'll get back to you. As long as it's still that money. If you don't raise the required amount within a week, I'll contact you. Then you'll have to deal with it another way." Peter has disconnected. Now all we had to do was wait. Half an hour later, Clara came out of the entrance and got into a car parked nearby. Peter followed her, looping through the city streets. He already guessed that she had gone to Frank's house. The woman went into the house, but Peter wasn't going to end the stakeout there. Clara stayed at Frank's for about an hour. She came out highly agitated and angry. Slamming the door, she went on her way. Peter followed her, but the woman only stopped at the store and headed home. Peter then decided not to waste any time and drove home. Anyway, so he started from the doorstep. "I tracked down this Clara of yours and called Frank with a ransom demand for the body, as Nancy had mentioned. And what did he say? He agrees, but he wants proof. He wants a photo. So Nancy, let's get you under the body. Do you still have that dress you were wearing back then?" "Yeah, I lost it actually." "That's okay, but I'll have to tie you up and stain your face with something that looks like written blood." "I have paints," said James, who came into the hallway. "I think it'll look pretty natural." It took the next half hour to cremate Nancy. Peter spread plastic sheeting in the hallway for the girl to lie on. They took a few pictures, after which the guy did a little color work, correction. When Nancy saw the pictures, she was even horrified. She really did look dead in the pictures. "Do you think it'll work?" she asked Peter. "It's going to work." The bastard didn't even blink an eye and agreed. The only thing he cared about was where to get the money. Obviously, this couple is in a panic, very afraid of exposure. All the more I frightened him, saying that I had evidence regarding the location of his car at the time of the crime. "Your eyes are so rounded, Nancy." "Wow. What if he demanded it?" "You know," sighed Peter, "I'm the blackmailer here, and I'm the only one who can demand anything." He dialed Frank's number and arranged where he could send the photos anonymously. After examining the contents of the messages, Frank became even more nervous. "How will the transaction proceed?" "You will transfer me the money to the specified details. Within half an hour, I will send you the coordinates of the body. How can I be sure that you will not cheat? Believe me, I'm only interested in money. Otherwise, I wouldn't even call you. What you do with the corpse afterwards is none of my business." Well, that was Frank. No, but rudely interrupted Peter. We're serious people. I don't think you need to be reminded that you shouldn't go to the police. Besides, you don't stand a chance. I'm sure your sweat and grease marks will be found on the body. So you might want to think before you do something stupid. I understand you perfectly well. Frank snapped at me. Not an idiot. Peter grumbled, hanging up discreetly. A real idiot. He sat silently, thinking about something. Nancy was anxious to know the details. James had been pacing nervously for several minutes. That's what. Peter suddenly broke the silence. You said Alice had spare keys to the apartment. She does, Nancy nodded. But I don't know how to get them without giving myself away. We'll have to take our chances. There's no other way. Why do we need to get into the apartment? I think the couple would be actively planning their next move right now. Judging by the fact that Clara went to Frank's house today, it'll happen again, since the apartment was undisturbed. I plan to install a microphone so I can record conversations. I'm sensing they can talk a lot without witnesses. Peter. His father turned to him. You realize you won't be able to get those recordings in court. That's what's needed. Having such a trump card up your sleeve, you can easily divorce these lovebirds on official recognition. The main thing is a competent approach. All right, Nancy agreed. Let's go then. There's no point in delaying right now. Frank must have called his mistress by now. I don't think she'll go to him again tonight. Besides, they're both busy thinking about finding the right amount of money. But we're on our way to Alice now. Nancy. Alice shouted happily, hugging her friend. Where have you been? You can't imagine how worried I was. It's a mess at work. No one knows where you are. The phone's silent. Frank says you're sick, and you can't even pick up the phone. But I know that's not true. I've been to see you. He wouldn't even let me in. I didn't know where to look. The best part is he came by and asked me if it was summer. I was so surprised. And then I call him. Your phone is disconnected, and he's talking about this disease. I wonder what kind of sickness it is that you can't answer your friend close to you. Nancy, best friends unleashed. What I'm about to tell you must stay between us. You understand me? Alice looked at her intently. Nancy's tone was not at all joking. The girl realized that her friend was in some kind of trouble, and the man she came with was unfamiliar to her. Nancy introduced her companion. This is Peter, my friend. Alice is my best friend. Peter and Alice exchanged handshakes. The girl liked the man very much. She was very curious where Nancy had managed to meet such a handsome man and disappeared for a few days. Obviously, the friend had gotten into some kind of adventure. That's why Frank's so angry. Alice invited the guests into the room and sat them down on the couch. Well, she began. Tell me. Alice, please don't panic. Nancy warned her at once. The situation is as follows. Frank has turned out to be quite a scoundrel. I know it's hard to believe, but he tried to send me to the afterlife. What? Rounded his eyes. Alice, Frank, he's such a Hamlet. I'm sorry. He can't even cut up a chicken. I remember at the barbecue he stood there with a knife in his hand and cried. Alice, I'm serious. On our anniversary, he gave me sleeping pills, and then I woke up in some abandoned house, tied up. Look at this. Nancy showed me the rope marks still visible on my wrists. It's horrible, whoops. Alice, but that's not all. Nancy continued. Then Frank and some woman came there, and they were seriously discussing how to get rid of me. They wanted to cause an accident. This auntie knows people in all the agencies. No one would even dig. Accidents and accidents. I'd just be buried. Only it didn't go according to plan. I pretended to be dead. Very successful, by the way. So they had to leave my body there while they prepared the next one. That's where Peter's dad found me. Are you kidding me? Alice couldn't believe it. Why on earth would he get rid of you? You've been married 6 years? I don't even remember one serious fight. That's true, my friend. Except I think it's all about the money. Money? Alice was surprised. He makes good money. Why does he need your money? I'm not sure he makes good money anymore. Remember how he persuaded me to sell all the paintings? I only agreed to sell one. I got a good deal on that one, and I gave him every penny of it. He invested, and guess what? It's been almost a year, and I still haven't seen him make any serious profit. I mean, he's made some withdrawals, but given the amount of money he's invested, the amounts aren't commensurate. Have you talked to him about it? Of course I did, but it made sense to me at the time. He convinced me that there was no point in withdrawing the profit and that it was easier to keep it in the system so that it would work and bring in more money. She showed me all sorts of figures, but I don't understand anything about it. What do you think? I think there's no money in the accounts. According to my calculations, there should have been several million in there. In fact, there's only a few $100,000. I don't know where the money went, but now I'm pretty sure it's all mine. Frank spent on his mistress Clara this, with which they plotted to remove me. Alice has digested the information. So what do we do now? There's no way for you to go home. And we've put on a little show, Peter said. These two think Nancy is dead. That's what we thought we'd take advantage of. Oh my God. Alice was horrified. I contacted Frank under the guise of the body snatchers. When they came to the house to get Nancy, they found the door broken in from the outside and no body. Now I'm charging them a tidy sum, which Peter says he doesn't have. Alice, said Nancy, we need the keys to my apartment. Peter wants to install a wiretap so we'll be aware of the couple's plans. Yes, of course, nodded Alice. You just have to get Frank out of the house somehow. You know he doesn't get out much. Don't worry about that, Nancy said. Most importantly, I beg you, don't blab to anyone that you saw me. You're kidding your lips for a long time, Alice. What do you take me for? That I put you in the clutches of these scumbags. I have some interesting information for you, Peter said into the phone. You need to come now, drop off the coordinates. Where? What kind of information? Frank asked cautiously. When you arrive, you'll find out. I hope you are collecting money. We're running out of time. Don't rush me, Frank snapped at me. I told you everything will happen. Peter sent Frank the coordinates. There was no information for him, but it was necessary to lure the man out of the house. Peter sat in the car in front of the driveway. After a few minutes, Frank came out, got into the car, and drove away. Peter wasted no time and went up to the apartment. He opened the door, disarmed the alarm system using the code Nancy had given him. He walked through the rooms and set up 3 microphones in different rooms where he thought Frank and Clara might be most likely to be. Well, he said aloud, I hope this works. He hurriedly left the apartment and called Frank again. There's been a mix-up, he reported. Don't go anywhere. I'll get back to you later. Frank cursed back, but Peter wouldn't listen and disconnected. The man quickly drove home, where his father and Nancy were waiting for him. Everything is ready, he informed his household. Peter turned on his laptop and opened some program. Let's hear what they have going on. For a long time, nothing was heard. Then Frank's voice came out. He was on the phone. Clara said, man, come over right away. I'll meet you there. About 40 minutes later, Clara arrived. Nancy could hear her heels clacking and a disgruntled voice. We're going to have to take a risk, Frank told her. Are you ready? What else is left? What do you have in mind? We need to get to the paintings. That's easy for you to say. Doesn't it bother you that only your wife has access to the vault, and she's dead? Look, all the documents in here are key to the safe deposit box. And the cell phone, too. I visited the vault with her. It's rudimentary, no biometrics or anything like that. You just go to the bank, show your ID, fill out a couple of forms, and unlock the box with your own key. Who would go, I wondered? Clara grinned. You and me. Are you serious now? You think the bank employees are so stupid that you can't tell one woman from another, and you're serious. Do you two look alike in build? Do you even have a face in common? Put on a little more color. Put on a wig, her clothes, now practice signing her name. She's only been to the bank once. I don't think anyone remembers her very well. Anyway, this is our chance. And we can take it all at once, pay off the kidnappers, get rid of the corpse, and then just disappear. That's enough money for you, me and Thomas, to live on for several lifetimes. Who's Thomas? Nancy asked in a whisper. Quiet. Peter interrupted her. It's all for later. I don't know, Frank, Clara continued. The idea seems dubious to me. And if we all get in, How will you come with a confident look and show the documents? Well, who, tell me, is an exact copy of his passport photo? The most important thing is to act without hesitation, so that no one sees your excitement. All the more reason for me to be with you. In fact, if we don't take the risk, we'll be in a very unpleasant situation. If Nancy's body turns up anywhere, we'll both end up in jail. Especially since this man claims he has proof that we were at the crime scene when she died. Even if he's bluffing, we can't take any chances. I'd be the first to get suspected. I can't take you with me, of course. But what are you going to do without me? All right. After a short hesitation, Clara agreed. And they will not be embarrassed that I am 10 years older than your wife, and I'm not making it up. You don't look your age. Besides, it's hard to tell how old a woman is. Okay? Clara agreed with doubt in her voice. Tell me something. So they give us the body. What are we going to do with it? There's no way to fix the accident. It's been days. We'll have to get rid of it. I'll file a missing persons report and have the police look for it. After a while, she'll be reported missing because we won't care about the inheritance. It won't concern us anymore. We'll all go away together as far away as possible. There's nothing to keep you here. If the body turns up, how are we going to dispose of it? In the woods? Dig? No, we need another way. A safer way, you know? Suddenly, Clara added, after some thought, I have a friend who works in a chemical factory. If he's well paid, he can get nitric acid. I've heard it dissolves any organic matter without a trace. Acid? Frank asked in horror. What's the big deal? It's the perfect solution for us. No one will ever find Nancy. Let everyone dig around. Yeah, there's something to it. All right, let's buy the body first, then we'll decide. But I'll contact my contact. The rest of the conversation was of no value in terms of case information. When Clara left, Peter and Nancy looked at each other. You realize they're just going to rob me outright, Nancy said indignantly. After the previous events, it seems ridiculous, Peter grinned. Don't worry, they won't get away with it. But we can catch them in the act. I wondered, Nancy thought. Who was this Thomas they were talking to? Is there someone else in their gang that we didn't know about? I'll try to find out, Peter wondered. He didn't like the fact that there was someone else in the case either. Nancy, Peter, and James were discussing a plan of further action. There were two options. According to the first, they were to report the planned robbery and catch the criminals red-handed at the bank when the paintings were in their hands. The second option suggested a more complicated chain of events. Peter proposed to let Frank and Clara leave the bank and to catch them in the act later when they tried to get rid of the stolen goods. It was obvious that Frank would try to sell one of the paintings on the black market to get the required sum for it quickly, for time was pressing him hard. Peter knew of several suitable sites by virtue of his old service. All the more reason to know exactly where Frank would try to auction the canvas. Listening to their dialogues with Clara, after a small meeting it was decided to stop at the second option. At 12 o'clock noon, Peter and Nancy were sitting in the car parked in front of the bank branch where the vault was located. They knew what time Frank and Clara would be arriving. The couple had been making intensive preparations since the morning, discussing their every move, so all they had to do was wait for them. Around 1:30, Frank's car pulled up in front of the bank. When Clara got out, Nancy cried out in surprise. The criminals had done their best. In the clothes they had found, Clara looked exactly like her with her long black wig and glasses. Look, she turned to Peter. Well done. If I'd met her like that in the city, I'd have thought I was crazy. Very much like that indeed, nodded Peter. Tell me, are there really no biometric sensors? Strangely enough, not these days. It's enough for them that you have a key to the box, documents. I was surprised myself that they don't even require a fingerprint. But I was assured by the personal manager that the vault was absolutely secure. Personal manager, are you sure he won't notice the switch? That's just it, Nancy laughed. Frank knows perfectly well that the old employee has moved on and I've been assigned a new one. He's never seen me in person before, we've only talked on the phone. So this couple has a good chance of success. When you sign the application for access to the safe deposit box, it's authenticated by phone, just give me the code. Do they have a phone? And Peter's thinking again, let's hope they succeed. Although for us any outcome is favorable, just the punishment for theft for them will be less severe than for the attempt to get rid of you and the sale of the painting. It's ridiculous to even hope for the success of your own enemies. Nancy grinned grimly. Frank and Clara stayed at the bank for about an hour. Nancy was beginning to worry that the staff suspected something wrong and called the police. Soon, however, the couple emerged from the branch carrying bulky flat bags, each containing a canvas bag. Nancy recognized the pouches as she had personally packed the paintings in them before taking them to storage. Look, she turned to Peter. They've taken everything. See, they have 3 bags with 5 paintings in each. Well done, nodded Peter. I can't tell you anything. And here's the scoundrel himself. All right, now we can't delay. We must hear what they were going to do next. When Frank and Clara reached the apartment, Peter turned on the tape again. I told you this would work. Frank's voice was happy and excited. You're doing great. You should have seen yourself. I even believed it was you, Nancy, for a moment. You should have known how scared I was. I thought I'd get caught at any moment on a little thing. We were very lucky to have the head of the department. That woman had her eye on me the last time I was here. So all the attention was directed at me, and you didn't notice her flirting openly with me. It was funny, I noticed. Clara laughed. Women. Show a handsome man and they forget everything. So what do we do now? Let's choose a painting. I'll put it on the internet auction. If we bid low, they'll buy it fast. We've got a few days left, so we'll find a buyer. Look, there's a couple of sites. We'll put it up everywhere to be sure. Frank appeared to be showing Clara the sites. Their names were familiar to Peter. Every time they heard another name that Frank said, they typed it into the search engine. Peter nodded contentedly. That's good. He said aloud, as I thought, your husband is not original. He picked the most famous venues. How does he know them? Nancy wondered. It's not the first time he's used them. You didn't know him at all. Husband's a real piece of work. Why, I'm not even surprised, Nancy sighed, noting to herself that Peter had slipped into the first name. She decided to use his example. And now you want to pretend to be a buyer? Yes, but we need to know exactly what painting they're showing. Otherwise, we're going to be going through 100 years of bids. It's not like he's going to put it up under his own name. They're taking their time choosing. As if hearing his words, the criminals began to discuss the painting that would be their ticket to a better life. The main thing now is not to be greedy, said Frank. Look, we will have to put the most expensive painting very cheaply according to the appraisal documents. This painting is the most valuable thing in the collection, but it can be sold much more expensive than Clara reasoned. It is possible, but only at an official auction. Not forgetting that we got the paintings illegally, you cannot sell them officially. Our main goal now is to sell one painting, so that the proceeds would be enough for the ransom and our escape. We'll sell the rest gradually. Of course, we'll lose a lot of money, but we won't have to share it with anyone. And in any case, it'll be enough money for a secure old age. Not even our Thomas. That's how Clara's voice sounded more enthusiastic. Of course, then you can take care of the documents on the paintings, but that they are supposedly in my property and sell already much more expensive. Moreover, no one will report the theft. Now I'm going to ask you to take a picture of the canvas. I'm not much of a photographer. While Clara was busy taking pictures, Nancy frantically remembered which of the paintings was the most expensive. According to the expert's estimation, the intruders had stubbornly failed to pronounce either the title of the work or its author. Here it is. Suddenly she shrieked. I remembered. She told Peter which painting the scoundrels wanted to sell, but there was no advertisement with such a law on the websites. It took about 2 hours until finally the proposal was posted. I had to wait a while longer before writing to the seller so as not to arouse his suspicion. Clara called Frank. Look, we seem to have a potential client. Is he serious? The woman asked, puzzled. I can't tell you yet. He's interested, if the documents and all that. I gave him the results of the examination and hinted that the picture got to me not quite honest way. Are you crazy? Who would buy stolen goods out in the open like that? Or don't be ridiculous. Frank calmed her down. That's exactly the point. Peter realized that Frank was hooked and was eager to play the interested customer. He even asked if he could do his own due diligence before the deal. Frank agreed, but his only requirement was time. He hinted to the buyer that he needed to get the deal done as soon as possible, so lengthy appraisals were out of the question. Peter agreed, assuring him that the appraisal would take no more than an hour. It would require meeting at any convenient location with an expert he would send. Frank said that he would bring the painting at any time to wherever it was needed. Peter then gave his own address, saying that there was an art expert living there who would be willing to provide such a service. The meeting was set for the evening. All that was left was to wait. James volunteered to play the expert. He thought that Frank could recognize Peter by his voice, as he repeatedly talked to him on the phone. They prepared everything they needed. Peter went somewhere and brought some optical devices, a scalpel and jars with chemicals. Look, he turned to his father and Nancy. This is usually used to authenticate a painting. Dad, you'll need to look through a magnifying glass like this. Apply a couple of strokes of ruler and acid around the edges of the painting and write a report. I'll prepare the files. All you have to do is print it out and sign it. I got it, son. Don't worry. I hope this Frank doesn't know much about this kind of work. No, Nancy was quick to reassure him. He doesn't know anything about this stuff. He didn't even go to the initial examination with me, so you won't suspect anything. Good, Peter nodded. When the doorbell rang in the evening, Nancy and Peter locked themselves in the back room, and James went to meet the guest. Peter had set up a miniature camera in the living room, where the examination was to take place, so that everything that happened would be recorded. Greetings. James greeted the visitor. My name is Anthony. A mutual acquaintance of ours told me you'd be stopping by today. Please come into the room. Let's not waste any time. Yes, nodded Frank, holding a large rug in his hand. I hope it's not a long process. It all depends on the condition of the cloth. James played the expert with conviction. I tend to see the originals right away. On the other hand, my client said that the painting belongs to the unknown works of this artist, but there are some features characteristic of his brush. Don't worry, I'm a specialist just on it. So it shouldn't be too difficult to identify a non-original. I don't think you would take up my time by bringing the copy here. Of course not, Frank exclaimed hotly. I have the official report in hand, but the client insisted on an additional examination. And his wish is law. Let me take a look. Frank handed James the papers. The man studied the contents of the document for a long time, nodding for conviction. I see you've gone to a good specialist, he said. He read the paper to the end. A former colleague of mine. You can trust his judgment. But let's take a look at the paintings. James carefully divided the canvas into steel, turned on the lamp, and began to manipulate, giving the appearance of professional work. Frank watched his actions carefully. James realized that he was very nervous, but continued, trying not to be distracted by the visitor. Look at this, he turned to Frank. You see, these strokes are characteristic of the artist. Few people have painted in such a technique. It's very difficult to replicate. The Rockefellers are talking about the age of the canvas. It's a match. We'll do a little more chemical analysis, and then we're done. James applied a small amount of the reagents, waited a couple of minutes, and dedicated an ultraviolet lamp to the treated area. Well, after a while, he informed Frank, I can say with certainty that we have the original in front of us. Who would doubt it? Replied Frank. Now I will print you a report, so our client can be sure that everything is in order. I will call him now to verbally confirm that he can safely purchase the painting. While Frank packed the canvas back up, James pretended to be on the phone. He printed out the file his son had prepared, signed it, and escorted Frank out, telling him that he could contact him at any time, should such services be needed again. When the visitor left, Nancy and Paul came out of their hiding place. So is everything all right? James smiled. Now it's up to you. The meeting with Frank was scheduled for 12 o'clock. The place for the transaction was a small office, which Peter had rented in advance so that nothing would arouse the seller's suspicions. The office consisted of a reception area and 2 rooms. The first, Peter set up his workplace. In the second sat Nancy in the company of 2 employees from the investigation committee. Peter's old colleagues whom he had brought up to speed. A girl who also worked for the police was put in the reception area and had to pose as a secretary. When she entered Peter's office and informed the visitors everything was already ready for the play, Frank entered, carrying the same coffee in his hands. "Hello," he shook Peter's hand. "Let's not introduce ourselves to each other. I think it's unnecessary." "Good afternoon." Frank responded to the handshake. Peter's voice sounded vaguely familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had heard it. "I second that. Let's get this done as soon as possible. Anthony called me yesterday and said everything was fine. I'll take a look at the picture myself. If I'm satisfied, I'll wire you the money right away. Is that okay?" "Quite," Frank nodded. "How about some coffee?" Peter asked. "I wouldn't say no," nodded Frank. Sitting down in the chair, Peter pressed a button on the switchboard and asked the secretary for 2 coffees. A couple of minutes later, Nancy entered the office from the next room, holding a tray with 2 cups. Frank sat with his back to her, so he didn't immediately notice when she came up to his side, placing one of the cups next to her. And he turned around to thank her, then froze with his mouth open. The next second, he rushed to the front door, but it was locked. To no avail. Pulling the knob, Frank tried not to look at his wife. Frank suddenly turned to him. "Sit down, please." He stood for a few seconds in indecision, then obediently sat down in the chair. "What's going on with your voice?" he asked. "Can't you guess?" Nancy answered him. Frank felt his palms sweating. He looked at his wife, and they ghosted. "See, darling, calm down." She went on. "It's all over." "Are you alive?" Barely moving his tongue, he said. "But how did I see your corpse myself?" "I know, darling," she smiled. "I'm a good actress." "Aren't you?" "Who are you?" Frank turned to Peter. "I'm the one who gave your wife a chance to take revenge on her abusers." "Are you with the police?" "No," Peter said absent-mindedly. And then Frank realized he was the man he had spoken to on the phone. "What are you up to?" he asked angrily. "Do you think you can accuse me of anything? You have no proof. In short, no one will believe even the convincing ones." "That's where you're wrong," Peter interrupted him. "We have more than enough evidence. All your conversations with Clara were recorded, as was your visit to the expert. Even if we can't get you for attempted murder, believe me, you'll go to a place not so far away for grand larceny. That shouldn't be too hard to prove. I think the bank records will suffice. And keep in mind that not only you, but also your friend will suffer." She was the main perpetrator, taking the paintings from the box. "It was all her," Frank said after a moment's pause, sighing heavily. "Nancy, I didn't mean to. I swear to you." "Didn't mean to what?" His wife looked at him scornfully. "Getting rid of me, we've heard everything from planning the accident. You drugged me with sleeping pills on the day of our anniversary, ruthlessly tied me up, and didn't even make sure I was really dead. You brazenly stole from me, and then you say you didn't mean to. You don't know anything. Don't tell me you were forced," sighed Peter. "I realize that you're going to start shifting the blame to the other person, although it's obvious that you're both to blame." Frank was silent for a long time, picking the armrest with his fingernail. He realized that he couldn't get away with it. Unless these people were lying. It was clear from their faces that they were determined. The truth would have to be told. He did not expect Nancy to forgive him, but there was still hope inside him that his wife and her acquaintance would show him some mercy. If he repented for what he had done. Clara Frank had met him 4 years ago. At that time, he was already 2 years married and really loved his wife. However, marital happiness was marred by the fact that Nancy did not want children. Unlike her, Frank literally raved about having a child. He dreamed of a son, but any conversations with his wife on this topic did not bring results. The man did not understand how this could be. Both were healthy and had a stable income, their own home. In the eyes of the public, their couple was ideal. Alas, Nancy's maternal instinct was completely absent. One day, after another attempt to persuade his wife to have children, defeated Frank went to the nearest bar. He had already drunk more than 1 glass of whiskey when he saw an attractive woman next to him. The conversation started immediately. The pretty blonde introduced herself as Clara. She was well into her 30s, but her personal life was not going well. The woman had been through a divorce and it turned out that she shared the same problem with Frank. Clara's ex-husband did not want to have children, and this was the reason for the divorce. Clara did not want to give birth just for herself, so a child from a casual relationship was out of the question. The woman dreamed of a full-fledged family. As they say, either everything or nothing. Desperate, she chose the second option. Frank also shared his worries about his wife and their future together. Under the influence of strong drink and common grief, Frank and Clara did not notice how they found themselves in the same bed. The man never thought of cheating on his wife, but then something came over him. In the morning, he repented of his deed and, leaving the apartment, tried to forget about what had happened. However, the new acquaintance did not get out of his head. He went several times to the bar where they met, but the woman was not there. Then he decided to go to her house. Frank himself did not know why, but something irresistibly drew him there. Clara met him, surprised. She had never expected that the casual acquaintance from the bar would show up again. From then on, they began to see each other constantly. Every chance they got, Frank drove to her place. Nancy had no idea. He didn't want to lose his wife, but he wasn't going to give up his mistress either. And then Clara told him that she was pregnant. Frank at first did not even believe it, but while the information gradually reached him, he became more and more confused and seriously, still not believing, he asked Clara, "Yes, I went to the ultrasound yesterday. It's already 8 weeks. Is the due date a boy or a girl?" "Stupid?" asked Frank. "Silly," laughed Clara. "How can you tell at this stage? You have to wait. So you mean you're going to keep the baby?" Frank was surprised. Of course, Clara said it as if she had been slapped in the face. "How can I get rid of it? A child is all I've ever dreamed of. You realize you'll have to raise it alone." Even so, the woman replied sadly, "Will it all work out somehow?" "No, Clara, you mustn't think so." Frank contradicted her hotly. "I won't leave you alone with the baby." "Do you mean to say that he will divorce?" The woman was surprised. If necessary. But time passed, and Frank was in no hurry to tell his wife about his second woman. First, he was afraid of hurting her, and then it was silly to start a conversation. Clara was not satisfied with this state of affairs. She constantly reminded the man of his promise. But Frank found another excuse. When Clara gave birth, she calmed down for a while. All her thoughts were devoted to her newborn son Thomas. She was quite satisfied with the fact that Frank visited them every day, gave gifts, bought everything necessary for the baby. He was deceiving his wife, telling her that all the money he was earning was invested. In reality, any profits he immediately withdrew and gave to Clara and Thomas. He didn't want them to need anything, so he preferred to deceive Nancy, who continued to be clueless. It suited her just fine that her husband had stopped pestering her to have a child. He successfully concealed his left-handed adventures. Constant fluctuations in exchange rates led to the fact that Frank lost on another deal a very large amount. At that time, Thomas was already 2 years old. One day he came to Clara and told her about his financial difficulties. The woman reacted rather aggressively. She is used to getting everything from her lover, just ask for it. But this time her desires and his possibilities were at odds. "How long will it last?" she asked unhappily. "I can't say yet, but we'll have to tighten our belts for the next few months. I know you wanted a car, but I can't buy you one yet. Do you have any idea how hard it is without a car when you have a small child? I can take you anywhere." Frank tried to defend himself. "Of course you can. And what if you need to go to the hospital at night? That you leave your wife and rush to us? I find that hard to believe." "Clara, yeah, you say something like that. I'll be there if you call me. That's my son. What's stopping you from always being there for your son?" The woman rebuked me. "You're doing well, I see. You think if I don't bring up your divorce, I've forgotten everything? No, darling, I'm tired of living like this. It's up to you. Either you do it right now or you get out of our lives." Clara Frank had never expected his mistress to demand such decisive action from him. He had already gotten used to the way things had turned out, so he had stopped thinking about divorce. But now to leave Nancy was simply necessary, otherwise he would lose his son. Clara was a pretty tough person, so she would hardly go back on her word. All right, I'll file divorce papers shortly. But when Frank returned home, Nancy shocked him with the news of the inheritance. And when it turned out that his wife became a millionaire overnight, Frank, thinking that now was not the right time to leave her, especially when they sold the first painting, he immediately became the owner of a tidy sum, which his wife gave to his business without even blinking. Frank immediately bought Clara a car and explained that, since the situation has changed, it is better to wait a little with the divorce, trying to get even more money. Satisfied with the gift, Clara changed from anger to mercy, agreeing to wait. But as time went on, she was in a hurry to sell the canvases. No matter how Frank persuaded her, the problem was that the woman was not interested in money at all. All these profits, exchange rate fluctuations, and other financial things caused in her even more longing than talking about the child. However, she was well aware that painting could be a good investment and a reliable insurance for a rainy day. When Frank explained all this to Clara, the woman became enraged. She realized that the man was not going to divorce, and the money was quickly melting away. It was necessary to find a way out. And one day she suggested a terrible thing to Frank. "Listen, darling," she began affectionately when Frank arrived again. "Tell me, do you love Nancy?" "What are you starting again?" Frank replied unhappily. "And I mean it. No, don't think so. I'm not going to start the topic of divorce again right now." "What then?" the man muttered. He had already subconsciously sensed in Clara's tone some kind of trick. "But do you love her or not?" She insisted. "No, I don't." "You realize I'm with her now, don't you? It's only because of these features of living paintings that I'm trying to get her to sell something. Business is slow. If I don't get any money soon, I won't be able to help you like I used to." Clara said cryptically. "What are you willing to do for Thomas and me?" "Anything," Frank replied passionately. "Anything." Clara smiled. "Then listen to what I have in mind. You won't get anything after the divorce, right?" "That's right," nodded Frank. "What if Nancy dies? If she dies, all her property goes to me. I'm the only heir, and she has no relatives." "Well, there's your answer." Clara continued to smile. "I don't understand. What's the answer? What makes you think Nancy is going to die? She's not even 30. No, she's healthy as an ox. You know, honey, there are 1,000 accidents in the world every day." "Wait a minute." Suddenly Frank figured it out. "Are you suggesting we take her out? Fake an accident? What's the big deal?" The woman shrugged. "What's the big deal?" "What's the big deal? It's a living person. What right do we have to send her to the afterlife? It's a crime." "Clara, are you going to lecture me now? You know what I don't like? My plan is failing. Forget about coming here. We don't want your money or you. And don't even think I'll ever be your underground son." Clara knew how to manipulate Frank. He was really willing to do anything for Thomas. He sat there at a complete loss, realizing that the woman wasn't kidding. If he crossed the threshold of the apartment now, he would never see them again. Good. He sighed heavily. "What do you suggest?" "I don't know yet. I just suggested it." Clara said smugly. "Honestly, I didn't think you'd say yes, did I? Yes, I'm a rascal. To send his beloved wife to the grave for the sake of his son. Very Shakespearean." Frank chuckled. "Lady Macbeth, too," he thought, looking at Clara. "They do anything for money. Filthy woman. If it hadn't been for Thomas, I would have left a long time ago." But he had no choice. He felt sorry for Nancy. He'd grown used to her over the years. And she was a good person. Should she have given in to his entreaties and sold those stupid paintings? It was her own fault. She should have been so stubborn. A couple days passed when Clara called to say she had a plan. Frank rushed right over. "You're going to do this," the woman began. "It's your anniversary the other day. Here, Mike, give her some sleeping pills. Then put her in the car and see her at the address I'll give you. I'll meet you there." Frank did everything Clara wanted him to do. When Nancy passed out, he carried her to the car and drove her to some abandoned house. There wasn't a soul around. Inside, Clara was already waiting for him with ropes. Together, they tied the girl up tightly and locked her in a room. In the morning they returned, horrified to find Nancy dead. This outcome partially disrupted their plans, but Clara assured them that it would not be a serious problem. She had connections through which she expected to make it look like an accident. The problem came later when they arrived and the door was open. The body was gone. Clara didn't understand how anyone could have gotten into the house. But the fact remained. They were now in a very unpleasant situation. Both of them had no idea what to do. What frightened them most of all was that the corpse had fallen into the hands of the police. But Clara argued that the chances of that happening were extremely remote. And even if it was, there was no evidence that they had anything to do with Nancy's death. At first, Frank offered to report his wife missing, but Clara demanded that he hold off. And then we got the kidnappers. You know what happened next? Frank sighed heavily. Why didn't you tell me you had a son? Nancy asked. Do you think I would have acted like a brute? What would you have done? Pat me on the head. It's treason, Mother. Of course, I wouldn't have been happy about it. But I loved you, and I knew you wanted a child. It could always have been amicable. What are you talking about? It's easy to talk about it now, when it's already happened. You'd have just thrown me out of the house and left me penniless. Even so, Nancy argued. But is that any reason to decide to commit a crime? You know me well. I don't leave my loved ones in distress. If you talked to me, I'd have given you a couple of those ill-fated paintings just to get you out of my life forever. What's the use of talking about it now? Frank said sorrowfully. You can't undo what you've done, Nancy. I'm really sorry about what happened. If I had the chance to make it right, I would have done everything in my power. And what happens now? Now you're going to be arrested, Peter said calmly. You realize that even after a confession, you can't just let it go. Of course, it all depends on Nancy whether she'll claim an attempt on her life, robbery, and all that. But I'd do my best to punish you, Valerie. You questioned the life of another human being, driven by your greed. I am willing to be punished, nodded Frank. Just please don't hurt Clara. She has a small child. Thomas won't survive on his own. How's that working out? With one eyebrow raised, Peter asked, according to you, this woman is to blame for everything. And now you want her to get away with it. And in the bank, she was the person who took the paintings from the vault. No, Frank, it doesn't work that way. She's the mastermind. She's not going to get away with it. Then we can make it look like I forced her to do it. You see, I have to spend the next few years in prison anyway. Thomas will have no one to take care of him. I am taking care of him. Nancy suddenly blurted out, which raised Frank's eyebrows. What do you mean, you? You can't stand children. Why would you do all that? And why would you care about the child of someone who almost took your life? It's called humanity, Frank, sighed Nancy. I have enough money to take care of the child until his parents are released. I'm not going to claim him, but I agree to be a guardian. In spite of everything, I don't want to ruin anyone's fate. But I can't let this woman go free without realizing the consequences of her actions. Thank you, Frank said only. After these words, the operatives came out of the room and charged Frank. They had his full confession in their hands. The man obediently put up his hands to have the handcuffs snapped on him. The investigation lasted 4 months. Frank and Clara were charged with fraud and grand larceny, attempted sale of stolen property. Nancy decided not to report her kidnapping after all, even though Peter tried to insist otherwise. Peter, she persuaded him. Look, it didn't work out, all right? They're already facing a lot of jail time for the paintings. There'll be time to think about everything they've done. It's up to you, of course. The man shook his head. But I think a criminal should be punished for his actions. That's exactly what they did. It didn't work out. So in fact, there were no actions. I forgave them, and I drove them to despair. I should have just left him when I realized that he wanted a child, and I didn't. Kept spoiling his life. I feel sorry for that woman. Honestly, I do. I'm not excusing her. She's punishing herself more than our law can do. She's condemned herself to be separated from the son she loves. How much do you think they'll get? Well, with a plea of cooperating, I'm thinking 5 to 6 years. If they behave, they could get out early. You're seriously considering taking custody of Thomas. Of course, I promised. A child shouldn't have to suffer for the sins of his parents. And I'd rather have him than in an orphanage. Frank and Clara have reached a verdict. Both of them, as Peter said, were sentenced to 5 years imprisonment in a general security colony. Nancy returned to her apartment, but this time not alone, but in the company of a little boy. Thomas was 3 years old. He was already talking well. Nancy was even surprised at how connected the child's sentences were. She furnished a nursery for the baby and put him in kindergarten. Every day she took him to the nursery before work and picked him up afterward. Very soon she became very attached to the child. Without realizing it, Peter often came to visit. He said that the kid should see a man in front of him. As an example, she only spoiled him a lot. The girl argued, but realized that Peter was right. Sometimes they went together to James's, where Thomas found a wonderful friend in the person of good-natured Benedict. A close spiritual bond developed between the boy and the cat. Nancy was preparing for New Year's Eve with little Thomas, and they went to the mall to buy gifts and Christmas toys. Nana, Thomas addressed her. For some reason, he had nicknamed Nancy that and stubbornly refused to change his habit. "We'll buy a cake. Do you want cake, honey?" Nancy smiled. "Sure, we'll get cake and tangerines and colored balloons. And then you and I will go to the Christmas tree market." "Hooray!" shouted the joyful boy. "Christmas tree, have you asked Santa for a present yet?" Nancy asked the boy. "Yes." Squinting his eyes, the little boy answered. "And what, I wondered, did you ask him for?" "I won't tell," Tom replied stubbornly. "Well, tell me." Nancy patted him by the hood. "I promise I won't tell anyone." Honest. More honest than an honest puppy. Thomas said this with his lips pressed together and stared at the floor in silence. A puppy. Nancy was surprised. "A real one," sniffled the child. "Don't you think the puppy will freeze while Santa Claus is bringing it from the North Pole to you?" "He's got a fur coat, a warm nanny." "And that's right," smiled Nancy. Of course, a dog was not part of her plans, but for some reason she wanted to fulfill the boy's wish. Having collected a whole mountain of purchases, they went to the Christmas tree market. To Nancy's surprise, there was James, who was also buying a Christmas tree. "Nancy," the man greeted her. "What a meeting. I see you're getting ready for the holiday too." "We're going to buy the biggest tree we can," Tima proclaimed. "Like this one." "Wow, serious plans," laughed the man. He helped his friends choose a tree and load it into the car. "How about we all celebrate New Year's Eve together?" "Yay," Thomas rejoiced. "On it, we're going." "It's kind of embarrassing." Nancy was embarrassed. "Nancy, why are you embarrassed?" James asked. "We're not strangers. Both Peter and I would be very happy. Don't say no." "All right," agreed the girl. She was glad that these men, who had become part of her life under such dubious circumstances, had not left it, even when it was over. On New Year's Eve, she pulled up to the James house with the one and only. Taking gifts of groceries out of the trunk, she handed the boy a dressed-up box so that he could personally present his gift to his beloved grandfather. Thomas personally chose what to give James. It was a funny Christmas sweater that immediately caught the child's attention in the store. But she asked Nancy would Grandpa like it. Of course he would. She hastened to reassure the child. "It was you who chose it, you say," the child suddenly added. "Mommy and Daddy are coming too." The question stumped Nancy with the topic rarely asked about his parents. The boy was told that they had to go away for work, but would be back very soon. But it was noticeable that the child missed them a lot. Although Nancy tried to do her best to divert his attention, the door was opened by Peter. It was noticeable that the man was very happy to see the guests. Together, they walked into the beautifully decorated living room, in the center of which was a huge Christmas tree. Tom immediately rushed to look at the toys in the company of his favorite cat. "And we have presents," Nancy said cheerfully. "James, these are for you." The girl handed the owner her box, and the subject quickly ran up to give his gift as well. Yes, this is for you." The boy was literally glowing with happiness. When James took out of the box a brightly colored sweater from the snowman, he laughed for a long time, but immediately went to change clothes. "This is for you, Peter." Nancy smiled shyly, handing the man a brightly colored package. Inside was a kaleidoscope. What a thing! Peter marveled, and laughing. We together with the theme chose not the most serious gift, even children's I understand. For some reason it seemed to me that it is the one that will give you bright emotions. All the more difficult to give a man something really necessary. Nancy, this is a wonderful gift. Imagine, I had one just like it when I was a kid, but small. I used to play with it a lot, especially when I was sad. I don't know how you came to buy it. But I'm very glad, really, the girl smiled. Clean, nodded Peter. And I've got something for you too. He took from the shelves a large box, in which Nancy found a bracelet of surprising beauty. Jesus, Peter, it's so expensive. Are you out of your mind? What are you talking about? It's a gift. Please don't make me feel guilty. I took so long to pick it out. I really like it. Let's put it on right now. Peter clasped the clasp on her slim found wrist, and the piece looked even better. Nancy blushed thickly. Alice insisted that the wedding be organized in nature. They put up tents everywhere, hung garlands of flowers and lights. There were not many guests, but the company was very friendly. A small orchestra was invited. Live music created a surprisingly relaxed atmosphere. Immediately after the registry office, the newlyweds arrived at the glade prepared for the celebration. Nancy wore a stunningly beautiful dress, a tiara in her hair, and a bracelet on her wrist, given to Peter on New Year's Eve. From that very day, the girl did not part with the jewelry, considering it a personal lucky. In the summer, Alice prepared a wonderful holiday. Guests danced, enjoyed treats, the patronage of which was taken by James. He sweetly with the guests, talking about his culinary secrets. The girls literally clung to the charming chef. During the time during which Thomas went to the daycare center, Nancy managed to make friends with many moms whose children went to the same group. Some of them she was happy to invite to the wedding, because now they had so many common themes. Contrary to her expectations, motherhood was not as overwhelming a task as she had always thought. Of course, Nancy realized that Tema was not her son. But thanks to this boy, she was able to accept the responsibility she had always dreaded. It seemed terribly foolish to her, even now, the fury with which she had persuaded her ex-husband that children were unnecessary. It was all the fault of banal fear. But as they say, you can't beat a wedge. When Thomas came into our lives, there was no turning back. She always honored the commitments she made. It wasn't long before she realized that a baby wasn't the scariest thing on the planet, and when it became clear to her that it was possible to have a constructive dialogue with him. Then it became clear that motherhood is also very interesting. Thomas grew up very quickly. The boy was already 4 years old. He was getting bigger and smarter. Peter thought it was right to teach him to read. Very soon it became clear that the child showed great interest in the new hobby. Then Nancy decided not to stop there and gave him to an English learning group for preschoolers. And there Thomas did not fail. The girl was glad that her boy is developing so rapidly. Alas, as much as she wanted to, the boy was still not hers. Sometimes Nancy had fits of unbearable longing. She realized that in a few years Tema's real parents would return and the child would have to be given away. But for the time being, she didn't want to think about it at all. The newlyweds went on a wedding trip together with Thomas. James volunteered to babysit. He told the newlyweds to think about nothing and enjoy themselves. And so they did. 2 months later, Nancy realized she was pregnant. At first, she was wildly frightened when the gynecologist confirmed her fears. The girl sat in confusion, looking at one point on the wall. "Will you keep it?" the doctor asked dryly. "What?" Nancy asked again. "I'm asking. Do you plan to keep the baby?" "Of course," the girl answered, not very confidently. "It's just that you look so confused. That's why I'm asking." "First pregnancy?" "Yes," nodded the bewildered Nancy. "But it's no big deal. Now, then we'll put you on the registry. All that remains is to wait." "Thank you," she muttered and left the office. She didn't dare to dial Peter for a long time. Somehow it happened that they had never brought up the subject of a child. Peter remembered perfectly well what his wife's unwillingness to have children had brought him to. He already had a teenage son, so the question was not as acute as it had been with Frank. Everyone was already used to Thomas as if he were his own child. "Sashenka." Nancy spoke to her husband in a trembling voice when he answered the phone. Yes, darling, your voice is shaking. Is everything all right? Worried Peter. Don't worry, everything's fine. Nancy hastened to reassure him. But for some reason she herself cried. Nadia, what's wrong with you? I can hear you. Are you crying? Well, speak quickly. Peter, please come and pick me up. I'm texting you the address right now. Sure, Tuck. Just don't cry so fast. Peter wasn't fooled. 10 minutes later, he was there. Hope sat on the bench looking resolved. He came over to his wife and sat next to her. Well, tell me, what happened? In a serious tone, he began. Peter, still in a trembling voice, answered Nancy. You and I are going to have a baby. The man at first thought he had misheard. So sudden and unexpected did this news seem to him. Then he realized that his wife was serious. He jumped up from the bench and scooped Nancy up in an armful, surrounding her. Is it true? With burning eyes he asked, looking at the confused Nancy. On the face of it, so don't say anything. I can see by your silly look that it's all pure truth. Nancy laughed and cried at the same time. She felt so at ease in this man's arms, and she realized that he was the one who was to be the father of her child. Peter, she whispered, is this really happiness?
Subscribe and click the bell.
Darius circled the spoon around the plate. For about 5 minutes, Anthony patiently watched his daughter. But even her strong nerves eventually gave way. Doria, what fly bit you this morning? The girl rolled her eyes theatrically. Dad, there's no fly in our house that can stand it. They all die of boredom on the fly. Anthony carefully pushed the empty plate away. Watch her tongue. It's out of control lately, and you sound like a street junkie. I don't like it. The man paced the long tables, casting meaningful glances at the 12-year-old provocateur, without so much as twitching an eyebrow. After waiting a few seconds, he said defiantly, I love this crypt-like house. I'm also sick of this mess. How many times have I asked you to tell Kathy to cook something else? The housekeeper stood mute beside her master. After the girl's words, she shuddered as if electrical wires had been connected to her. Anthony stood up abruptly. Daria, as long as you live in this house, you will eat and drink what they give you. You're not old enough. You're not old enough to change things. Understood. Daria looked at her father and muttered. Understood. An oppressive silence hung over the dining room. The girl became defiantly apprehensive. She ate her porridge, but in her mind she was calculating how long it would take her father to travel the distance from one end, from the table to the other. The results of the mathematical calculations were disappointing, and Daria decided not to be angry anymore. Noticing that his daughter had relented, Anthony sat back down. Kathy, you can pour the coffee. The housekeeper hurried to the kitchen and returned immediately with a tray. Also speechless, she placed a cup with a steaming beverage and a miniature creamer in front of him. And coffee for me. Daria's voice sounded already indulgent. The man's pulse trembled, but he didn't fall for his daughter's ploy and said sternly, Kathy will prepare the cocoa when you've had your porridge. Caffeine is bad for you at your age, and by the way, you should despise this porridge so much. Even the royal family traditionally serves this dish in the morning. Daria snorts at Dad. Anyone would think he had breakfast at Buckingham Palace. The man's heavy masculine fist lands on the natural oak tabletop. Daria, what's with the language? I don't understand your intolerable behavior. Will you be punished today? Anthony turned to the housekeeper. Kathy, make sure this young lady doesn't run off anywhere. The housekeeper went back out of the country and looked at the master in a servile manner. All right, I'm watching. Let's give her a good thrashing today. I think a strict regimen will do my daughter good. She's getting a bit temperamental. Anthony came out of the huge dining room, and soon his energetic footsteps echoed ominously throughout the house. Daria wanted to burst into tears, but struggled to hold back the tears. What is it like for you to carry? Kathy, she bowed in a curtsy. Her whole appearance spoke of being ready to carry out any order, and this irritated the teenager more than anything else. The girl stood up and kicked a chair with her foot. I don't want anything else. And stay out of my way. Leave me alone. Daria didn't hold back after all. Tears burst the dam of patience. She ran to the second floor to lock herself in her room. Executive Kathy tried to catch up with her. "Daria, wait, you know your father doesn't like to be contradicted, right? If I don't follow his instructions, he'll fire me." The girl stopped in front of her room and raised her hands, imitating the fanfare. She acted in triumph. "Then it will be the happiest day of my life. Kathy, you bore me to tears. How's the oatmeal? It's as bland as you are." The door slammed in Kathy's face, and soon the sounds of music came from the landlord's daughter's room. Kathy jiggled the doorknob and, faintly audibly, let out a small snake, just like her late mother. Kathy worked as a housekeeper at Anthony's house. For almost 10 years, her teaching career didn't take off right away. After graduating from college, she got a job in an elite gymnasium, where in her first month of work, the young teacher had a conflict with the students of the class. She was only 22 years old at the time, and the student, whose last name she could not remember, was only 16. The boy was insolent to the point of indignation, and he turned every lesson into an enthusiastic spectacle. Kathy tolerated the young bullies, hoping that they would soon tire of this kind of entertainment. But the boy could not calm down. One day he went to the extreme, and when the teacher invited him to the blackboard, the boy gritted his teeth in her arms, saying, "Honey, let me give my lesson. I assure you, you'll love it." The class burst into hysterical laughter, and the young teacher burned with embarrassment. The defensive reaction worked spontaneously, and as soon as he freed himself from the embrace of the weeds, he gave her a resounding slap. The same day of the rematch, the principal invited Kathy into his office and immediately started yelling at her. "Kathy, what do you allow yourself? To use your fists in our gym? This is unacceptable. What was I supposed to do?" This young scumbag started using her hands in front of the entire class. The principal looked at the young teacher with contempt. "Do you expect me to believe you? Well, it doesn't matter anymore. We don't need that kind of staff. Do you even know who the father of the boy you beat up is?" Kathy shouted that I didn't hit him. I just slapped him. The principal frowned. "I don't think arguments are appropriate in this situation. File a complaint." Kathy had no choice, so she wrote a statement in her office. The graduate of a prestigious university, who was interning in the UK, hoped to get a job quickly. For 3 months, she went to schools, nurseries, and other institutions where her skills could be useful. But everywhere she was turned down. Desperate to find work, she made an appointment with the mayor. When the aide asked her why she was visiting the mayor, she lied. "I love our city very much, but it is not up to par with the regional centers in many respects." The mayor's aide didn't even hear the end of it, and he is right. "I would like more comfort and cleanliness." Kathy was pleased, but she noticed. "And that is easily accomplished by involving the youth." "That's a great idea. I think our mayor will appreciate your initiative, but the problem is that he's on vacation, so I'll refer you to the deputy mayor." But as soon as the visitor entered the official's office, her courage instantly vanished. The girl burst into tears. Anthony didn't understand what was wrong with her. "Calm down, and tell me, what was the problem you were trembling about?" stammered Kathy. "Please help me a little more, and I will simply starve to death because I have no means of subsistence." The deputy mayor shrugged her shoulders in confusion. "Young lady, don't talk nonsense. There are many vacancies in our city." "What are your studies, Kathy?" She took her documents out of her purse. The official opened the diploma, then the workbook, and smiled. "Yes, you have, to put it bluntly, an impressive record. Only 1 month. Tell me why you left the gym." "Kathy, did you tell this man everything in confidence?" Anthony wrote something in his diary and told her to come back the next day. Kathy showed up at the reception desk at the town hall at the appointed time, but Anthony told her not to. "Unfortunately, I still have nothing to tell you. The father of the pupil you had the incident with has blown the story wide open. That's why no school in the city wants to see such a troubled specialist." Kathy didn't take anything home. She was eager to leave this world as she saw no way out of the situation. But the girl did not have time to fulfill her plan, because just a couple of hours after her visit to the mayor's office, Anthony himself called her. "Kathy, considering your difficult situation, I can offer you a job as a governess for a while." My wife is seriously ill and we have a young daughter. Of course, it's not exactly a prestigious job, but at least you'll be able to earn a living." Kathy accepted immediately. At that time, her situation was really disastrous, and she forgot about her ambitions. My wife Adriana welcomed her warmly, although my husband and I had not planned to hire staff, but circumstances made us reconsider that decision. We will soon be moving to a new house, so I need a responsible helper. I hope we can be friends. The landlady had a pleasant timbre to her voice, and that lowered Kathy's guard a bit. But when Adriana looked at the girl, she couldn't help but think how unpleasant his wife's gaze was. It was then that she thought for the first time that she was not likely to find common ground with that woman. Kathy's intuition did not fail. Adriana, during her husband's absence, most of the day the landlady was absent from work. She invented for the housekeeper the most sophisticated abuses. But Kathy tolerated everything because she had nowhere to go, since she had no relatives. A great aunt said to her after school, "Dear niece, I've been dragging you around. How long can you manage on your own now? I'm still a young woman, and I want to make my own life in these square meters." Do you realize that? It's impossible to realize. My aunt had a one-bedroom apartment, and for several years Kathy lived in the kitchen. After graduating from college, the girl never visited her relative, although Aunt Miranda lived nearby. Once settled in the gymnasium, she immediately rented a room, hoping to settle down in her personal life. But these plans were not destined to come true. So working at Anthony's house eliminated a number of problems. And Kathy was very afraid of losing this place. For many years, she tolerated the nagging mistress and did not notice how she became a silent creature, ready to fulfill any whim of her mistress at the push of a button. Adriana, and she was clearly melting before his eyes, and her condition was deteriorating rapidly every day. She was suffering greatly, taking out her irritation on the housekeeper and her young daughter. So when the housekeeper went to the next world one nameless autumn day, Kathy breathed a sigh of relief. From then on, she felt more at home in her employer's house. But if Anthony was happy with this state of affairs, his reckless daughter was unwilling to accept these rules. And the older Doria got, the more difficult it became to accommodate the governess. Vanessa went to work as if it were a vacation, and she tried to show up early at her favorite school. The mayor's assistant's punctuality was legendary. It further enhanced the self-esteem of the woman, who was not distinguished by her outward attractiveness. Vanessa's main asset was her business qualities, and the mayor once jokingly confessed that without Vanessa he would be lost. "She is my light in the dark realm of bureaucracy." These words were spoken to Anthony in a small circle of friends many years ago, but they became faithful for the young woman, to whom the male sex paid little or no attention. Every morning she would wake up and mentally repeat "Nellie, hurry up," or "the boss without you will be lost." At first, this phrase was taken with humor. Over the years, it became a motto. By repeating these words, Vanessa gained confidence in her exceptionality. She did not hesitate to point out her mistakes to the boss. She could suggest the right decision. Vanessa was never wrong in her forecasts, so the mayor often consulted her on various matters. Thus, imperceptibly for her and for others, Vanessa gained universal respect. She was never called a secretary, and proudly wore this honorable title of the mayor's assistant. Of course, like any ambitious person, Vanessa wanted more. And when Anthony was widowed, she began to nurture the dream of becoming his wife. Of course, the boss was unaware of his right-hand man's secret plans, but Vanessa, with her usual diligence, worked in that direction. She was almost certain that she would achieve her goal. The only stumbling block was the boss's daughter. The girl immediately disliked her father's assistant. This little beast could read the thoughts of others from a distance. Vanessa tried several times to befriend Doria, but all attempts ended in complete failure. Then the woman went on the sly and began to give the boss's daughter small gifts in the form of charms and cosmetics and other trinkets. Doria easily understood this maneuver. Vanessa, and in front of his father, told the aunt, "If you want to buy me, you are trying in vain. It's a pile of junk. Don't waste it. Spend your modest salary." Although the girl's words hurt Vanessa's ego, she didn't even blink. But she threw the ball into the goal with her opponent, Daria, what comes from the heart cannot be measured with money. But unfortunately, young people like you have a somewhat distorted perception of reality and are oriented towards other values. Daria didn't quite know what she was talking about. She felt it was her duty to resist his influence. But suddenly Anthony supported his assistant. You're absolutely right, Vanessa. My daughter has been talking a lot of nonsense lately, and I often have to blush for her. So please don't be offended. Without realizing it, Daria had helped the woman who was struggling to take her mother's place. Vanessa sighed and shifted into the work groove. She was watering the flowers when Anthony burst into the reception area. Vanessa could tell by the boss's smoldering look that he was in a bad mood today. She instantly wiped the smile off her face and, in an emphasized official tone, told Anthony, "Today you have a conference call with your supervisors at 9:30, and at 11 you are to call the governor." Anthony let out a short one. "I know that, but thanks for reminding me." He strode confidently into the office, returning immediately to the reception desk. "Vanessa, if you don't mind, prepare a report on the work with large and low-income families, orphans, and other people in need of social support until tonight. But don't go into details, just generalities. Okay, Anthony, I'll do what I can." The mayor's eyes grew warm. "Thank you, Vanessa. I don't know what I'd do without you." The woman's heart fluttered. Happiness after the chief's encouraging words and pleasant thoughts flowed back in a measured stream. "I would do anything to make you happy. You have no idea what a woman in love can do." Anthony had long since forgotten about earthly affairs. Every day he had to deal with the important problems of the city. Therefore, that day he had no time to be distracted. The mayor's plans also went awry. When the governor called shortly after the conference call, "Listen, Anthony, are you planning to open a children's art center?" Anthony thought someone had already told him. But out loud, he cheerfully replied, "Yes, Stephen. But we haven't decided on a date yet. So you decide you're taking the cake. What's the reason for the delay? You know the objects of social importance we have in the first place." Stephen's displeasure was felt even from a distance. Anthony tried to say something, but the governor kept denouncing him for sloppiness, indifference, and other sins. "What are you doing in the governor's chair? Right, tidying up your city. And tidying up yours. This damn center was supposed to be finished in the spring, and it's already summer. What's the problem? The girls can't handle it, so whip them or give them a ruble. I don't care. Anyway, I'll give you exactly 1 week to fix the flaws. I hope you haven't forgotten that City Day is coming up." "I haven't forgotten, Stephen." "Well, that's good. The opening of the center is in preparation for the event. Invite the big-name guests, invite the sponsors. Not a bad idea to involve your family. It will be homey, warm, and touching. I promise I'll send a TV crew. And I'll probably be there myself." Stephen was famously tough, and Anthony knew perfectly well that his wish should be taken as an order. Inwardly he muttered, "I don't have enough to worry about without this center. Now I will have to take personal control of this facility." The reconstruction of the old gymnasium had long been on the city's agenda. On several occasions, the old building was first to be converted into sewing workshops, so local businessmen had their eye on it. But 5 years ago, Anthony's predecessor said, "This is where the kids are going to be." That's right, because the building was built a century and a half ago with donations from the townspeople. And we must continue the tradition of our ancestors. And it will be symbolic. This idea of the former mayor had the support of the higher echelons. Even a fundraiser was organized for the reconstruction of the old gymnasium. But as often happens in our country actively started the case, it soon faded. After talking with the governor, Anthony called his assistant. "Vanessa, I have a personal request for you to work with our local businessman. It is urgent." Vanessa immediately realized that this was a hot case. "Why the rarity?" insisted Stephen. Anthony sighed heavily. "No, he didn't. It rolled over me like a rolling pin. But there's no way out. We have to follow orders. So, a week from today, we have the grand opening of the Children's Art Center. The governor wants everything to be top-notch. I can't wait to do it." The aide said with confidence that we will do it, Anthony. Is this the first time we've been interrupted? The The mayor looked at the Vanessa woman with gratitude. "You are a true friend and comrade in arms." Second compliment. Just for one morning, Vanessa, after such a powerful impulse, was ready to roll mountains. She immediately pulled the secret list out of her desk drawer and began calling potential sponsors for the upcoming event. The mayor admired his assistant for a few more minutes. For the first time in his head, a brief flash, and blinked a thought. With such an enterprising woman, no difficulties are not terrible. But this thought quickly fled. It has not settled in the man's memory. Anthony returned home late. Although he was very tired after a hard day's work, but his mood was on the rise. He had time to visit the place that had so interested the governor. Contrary to expectations, the work there was quite active, and when the mayor told the foreman that it was necessary to finish the work in just 1 week, the foreman replied cheerfully, "Don't worry, we'll manage." As usual, the owner was greeted at the entrance by Kathy. Anthony cast a fleeting glance and thought of two women about the same age and so different. Vanessa is confident to the point of insolence, and this one looks like a marketable fish. She's afraid to say a word. The man looked back at the housekeeper. "Kathy, go get Daria. I'll be in my office." The daughter was not long in arriving. She breezed into her father's office. "Dad," Daria's belly called to me as her careless, smiling expression was a challenge to everything around her. But Anthony decided to ignore his daughter's antics. Gently, even with homely warmth, he asked Daria what she was willing to do for her friend. The girl clearly wasn't expecting such a question. "Dad, you're doing fine." The man smiled. "Do I look like an abnormal person?" "No, you don't, but you ask very strange questions about friendship." Daria sat on the back of the chair and hugged her father. "Dad, you won't believe this, but I don't have any friends I can go to the fire and water with. At school, everyone acts like I'm the mayor's daughter. Even the teachers get angry in front of me. Honestly, I'm sick of it all. I wish I had a sister or a brother." Anthony hadn't expected such a frank confession. He kissed his daughter gently on the forehead. "You and I are more or less in the same situation. In front of me, many subordinates also ingratiate themselves. It's true that not all of them are very self-confident people, ready at any moment to come to the rescue. They are the kind of people I usually trust." Daria smiled. "You, Vanessa. That aunt has other plans for you. I've seen her eye on you. I'm sure she wants to marry you. Daria, if you keep knocking your teeth out like that, you'll soon have to get dentures. And it's a little early for you to be talking about grown-up things." The girl sighed in relief, and the father continued, "Okay, a little joke. Let's get down to business. The Children's Center is opening in a week, and I want you to help me." Daria glared at her father in surprise. "What do I have to do?" "It's nothing complicated. You have to give a touching little speech. You're a smart girl, and I'm sure you can do it. You'll talk about family, friends, and helping each other. I think it's a personal mission from the governor for you. He even promised to send television crews." Daria paced around the office. "And what did he prod his father with? Our people will die of envy. When they put me on TV, I'll do it. I just need the right outfit." "The what?" Anthony looked at his daughter in surprise, but after a second he slapped his forehead with the palm of his hand. "I get it. You mean a suit?" "Well, yes, you could wear a classic dress. You know, something austere so everyone would think she was a good girl and a model student." Anthony didn't think his 12-year-old daughter could reason like an adult. "Daria, you put everything in place. Now all that's left is to prepare for the event." "Dad, why do I have to rack my brains? I'll tell Kathy. She'll help me with the speech. Or would you rather tell her?" Daria smiled and disappeared out the door. Anthony thought wistfully how quickly his daughter had grown up. A very independent girl making her own important decisions. When his daughter left, the man invited Kathy in. He briefly explained what was required of her. The young girl felt embarrassed because it was the first time in 10 years that she received such unusual tasks from her master. "Anthony, I don't even know what to say. I don't want to let you down, but I'm afraid I can't do it. I've forgotten everything I learned at the university." Anthony got angry. Is it so hard to find a suitable dress for a girl and write 2-3 sentences? Why do you always doubt everything? You need to be a little more confident and sometimes it's good to take the initiative. Kathy nodded her head a couple of times, and the shadow slipped out of the study into her room, where she was crying from overwhelming anguish. Despair. The master is right about everything. I am like an amoeba. I do not live, but I exist. I can't go on living like this. Such impulses often occurred in Kathy Leonidovna's modest life, but she ruthlessly extinguished them because she was too afraid to change anything in her life. After all, it is much more comfortable to go with the flow than to resist it. Another city day went by in style. Residents were amazed by the magnitude of the party. In a small provincial town, several themed areas were deployed where children and adults could have a great time relaxing. For example, in the park, a dance floor was organized for the older ones, where couples danced to the sound of a brass band. The younger ones had fun on the rides, and music lovers enjoyed the work of visiting artists. But the real highlight of the program was the long-awaited inauguration of the Children's Art Center. The governor himself came to town to say a few words. My friends, dear compatriots, you know that every talent has its origin in the homeland. And I am sure that the opening of the center will reveal new talents in the future. We do not yet know their names, but they will undoubtedly glorify this land. That is why I hand over the symbolic key of the new center to the representative of the young generation of our beautiful city. The square erupted in applause, and Daria proudly took the stage. Cameras clicked from all sides, but she only looked towards the place where the cameraman of the regional television studio was working. The girl gracefully raised beautiful foam keys on her outstretched arms, and without hesitation, delivered her speech. I am glad to have had the honor of inaugurating the Magic House. They say that each person from birth receives a gift, and for this gift to become a real talent, it takes a lot of work. Therefore, a master jeweler strikes a diamond, and experienced masters light up in the sky small stars of talent. And that these stars in our city will be more. Sounded solemn fanfare and decorated with balloons. The huge doors of the renovated building opened, causing great delight among the audience. Daria handed the keys to the director of the Cultural Center and finished her colorful speech. They also say that all children's dreams come true someday, and I would like to wish all children on behalf of myself and the city authorities. Don't be afraid to dream. The audience applauded Daria, and this was her moment of glory. As soon as she stepped off the stage, she was immediately surrounded by her peers and acquaintances. Daria, you're great. I'm so happy for you. You made a great speech. When are you going to be on TV? It was an obligatory question, and the girl answered confused. I don't know, they didn't tell me anything. She wanted to ask Kathy, who was by her side during the whole ceremony, but the governess disappeared somewhere. On the stage, the action continued, and according to the script, the godparents were now presenting gifts to the newly inaugurated center. They also spoke words of farewell, and the audience applauded actively. Suddenly, Daria felt dizzy and began to push her way through the crowd. She thought with annoyance, Kathy, you stupid chicken, how could she abandon me? It's okay, I won't complain about her to Daddy, and he'll give her a good life with pictures. The girl went to the central square of the town. There too, lively music was playing and people were strolling leisurely through the shopping streets. Nearby, Daria heard a familiar voice. She turned around and was almost stunned by the surprise. Kathy was walking next to the governor and chatting sweetly with an unknown man. The girl wanted to tell the housekeeper everything she was thinking, but he was looking at her so expressively that she forgot all the words. But the most surprising thing was that Kathy spoke to the strange man in German. And she did it with such ease and fluency, as if she had not been born in this city, but somewhere not far from Berlin. They walked past, confused. Daria's mood disappeared immediately. Everyone around her was amused, but she wanted to cry with resentment. She muttered to herself in despair. Dad is somewhere entertaining guests. He's a mummy. Kathy has found her own amusement too. I wonder who the guy is with whom she was having such a pleasant conversation. The girl didn't get the answer to that question until late in the evening, after she had taken offense at everyone. Daria returned home and locked herself in her room. She was already imagining how the housekeeper and then Dad would come back and urge her to sit at the table. But soon Kathy came back and immediately started pacing around the kitchen with the dishes. After a while, her father pulled up to the house in his SUV, but drove past his daughter's room and didn't even drop the usual on the way. "Daria, how are you?" Such an ignorant attitude towards her person. People close to her surprised and angered her at the same time. Therefore, Daria reluctantly left her shelter. Daria wanted to share her worries with her father and save up for a housekeeper. She was about to knock on the door of her father's study, but he came out. Seeing the daughter, Antonio said to Daria, "Did you do a good job?" "Very good. Thank you for not letting me down. But we'll talk about nice things later. Right now, I need to start a little secret with Kathy." "With whom? With whom?" The girl didn't immediately realize that Kathy was her housekeeper. She was unpleasantly surprised by her father's decision. And at first, she wanted to lock herself back in her room to suffer alone with resentment. But then she changed her mind and tiptoed into the kitchen. Daria knew it was wrong to eavesdrop, so she mentally reassured herself. It's okay to do it once in a while, when it's in the best interest of the common cause. Her intuition told her that her father was discussing something very important with the housekeeper. And because she was so curious, she decided to ignore the rules of decorum. The conversation must have been in full swing, for Anthony's voice was trembling with excitement. "Kathy, of course I realize you have your own life. And frankly, I'm happy for you, but it's all so sudden. It's like you've abandoned me, left me to my own devices. You're overreacting, Anthony. I don't have much to do in this house. And Daria's a big girl. She can manage on her own with a light breakfast. I'm sure you'll have no problem finding an assistant. It's just a click away. Ask your secretary. She won't refuse you such a small favor, will she?" Daria didn't have time to digest the information she had received before she heard her father's footsteps approaching. She hurried to hide in the alcove between the kitchen and the bathroom. As a child, this secret corner had been her safe haven, where she could sit for hours. Her heart was beating frantically, and she feared that the noise would attract her father. Contradictory feelings raged in her soul. On the one hand, he was glad that the pale moth was finally leaving his home. But on the other hand, the prospect of having to do everything herself did not bode well. Stubborn child. Resentment at the governess's behavior took hold of her. And the girl, after waiting for her father to close up in his study, walked confidently toward the kitchen. Kathy stopped at the stove. Without turning around, she said dinner wasn't ready yet. "Be patient, Daria, for about 5 minutes." "I don't want to be patient. Tell me, Kathy, how could you betray Dad and me? Did that guy cheat on you?" The housekeeper laughed. "Daria, were you eavesdropping? I didn't expect you to go down like that. And what guy are you talking about?" "The one you were traveling with in German. I thought he only spoke English. Turns out you can do it in German, French, Italian. I can also clap in your slang." Kathy approached the girl, wanting to hug her pupil, but Daria pulled away from her embrace. Then the woman leaned against the wall, and in a tired voice said to Daria, "There comes a time in everyone's life when they want to change everything. It happened to me today too. It's fate. I didn't even think that everything would change in a day. When you and I were going to the city party, but it turned out that suddenly the guest interpreter, who came from Germany, disappeared. Did you see him with the governor? He's the same one you didn't like for some reason." Daria didn't know what to say and sang reluctantly. Kathy laughed again. "By the way, he is a well-known businessman, head of a large company. He wants to open a production plant in the regional center." Daria interrupted the housekeeper impatiently. "Then let him open it. What's it got to do with you? This man has offered me a job I've never dreamed of." The girl had recovered from the shocking news. She commented with derision, "I see. And you, Kathy, you fell for that German's divorce. He'll leave you at the first opportunity." "Daria, why do you choose the worst options? I can't spend my life serving you. I have to think of myself." Daria had no valid arguments left and left the kitchen with demonstrative disdain, letting dinner continue without me. I'd had enough tonight to pass the time somehow. Daria turned on the laptop recently given to her by her father. Until midnight, she had been chatting with her friends on social media. Someone had already uploaded a video of her performance at the art center opening. He read the positive comments and his heart filled with a pleasant book. In her head, she thought, I am a star. Now everyone will know me. And that stupid Kathy can get the hell out of here. Daddy will find a new worker. In the morning, when Doria woke up, the house was very quiet. The girl felt terribly hungry and regretted having refused to eat dinner the night before. She said aloud, Kathy, I'm awake now. We have something to eat. But no one answered the call. Doria walked into the kitchen and saw a note on the table. Daria, breakfast is in the kitchen. I made this today. I hope you like it better than oatmeal. Have a good appetite. If it's hard, call me. At the bottom, a cell phone number was written in even handwriting. This time, the attack of resentment was so strong that Doria felt a physical pain in the heart area. And in the act, she began to scream, I hate everyone I hate. Doria felt the attack of resentment again and did not notice the tears rolling down her eyes in two thin knobs. She roared and thought bitterly that if her mother were there now, she would not let them hurt her only daughter. Little did she know that at that very moment she was only in another city. A completely different girl was also roaring in despair. And the reason for the tears, it was a colorful performance. Admittedly, she did not know the name of her doppelganger. The star video, uploaded to the network, in a few hours slipped among the leaders of views. That's why Maria's phone was bursting with calls from her colleagues. But the girl had to listen to mostly unflattering criticism. Maria, and we did not know that in our class, there is a girl with a double ass and quietly you have skillfully passed off as a gray mouse. And you yourself are a star. What kind of speeches can you make? Maria didn't have a laptop or tablet because she and her mother lived very modestly, so she didn't get a chance to watch the video that caused such a stir. But after a string of calls from her classmates, her teacher Kelly called her and asked her sternly, Maria, tell me, please, why am I the last person to hear about your adventures? It seems to me that you should have informed me and the principal before participating in such activities. Maria tried to explain to the teacher that there had been some mistake and that she had never been to that town in her life. But Kelly yelled at her not to be naive. In the age of technological advances, all things secret quickly come to light. Tomorrow I expect to see you and your mother in the principal's office. You will explain yourselves there. Nina wasn't kidding when, on her way home from work, she caught her daughter Maria crying. Who hurt you? You know you mustn't get upset. Maria's mother did not fear for her daughter's health in vain. The girl had been ill since she was very young. At the age of 5, she was diagnosed with a heart defect. The doctors said that the pathology was congenital and that there was a good chance that the defect would heal over time. But a positive prognosis is possible only if Mary will eat right and stay away from colds. The list of prohibitions was spinning and negative emotions. Therefore, Nina strictly followed the daily regime of his daughter. She did not allow her to watch horror movies. She also carefully selected from the literature to read. The woman began to scrutinize her daughter's room, trying to guess what exactly it was that made Mary cry. But the girl had already come to her senses a little. Mom, I haven't watched bad movies or read detectives. I'm just sick of the phone calls. Everyone calls and talks about some video on the internet. Maria tried to tell Mom what had happened. But Nina didn't understand any of her daughter Maria's authoritative narration. What video? I know more or less where this town is, but I have nothing to do with this settlement. You calm down. Now let's go to the neighbor's house. They have a computer and together we'll watch that damn video that has caused such a stir. The neighbor did not deny him a small servant and even offered to help him. He quickly found the necessary material. Here is the film about the Children's Center. The three watched the 2-minute clip recorded with a cell phone and fell silent. Nina didn't want to believe what she was seeing. No, it couldn't be. Molly said to Nina, there are other things in the world. You may have heard that somewhere. I think in Brazil there is a town where only twins live. The neighbor wanted to add more intrigue, but Nina cut her off abruptly. Molly, what does Brazil have to do with twins? Don't be ridiculous. I don't want my daughter to hit her head. That girl looks a lot like her. But at first glance, it's not Maria. Just a slight resemblance, that's all. The neighbor moved her lips resentfully and turned off the computer. Yeah, I don't really care. I'm not going to get involved in other people's problems. I have enough of my own. All afternoon, Nina tried to distract her daughter from the fun at home, but the image of the girl in the video gave her no peace. And an inner voice kept telling Nina, you have to find out. It's not just a coincidence, and you know it. You're just afraid that suddenly new circumstances will open up and change everything in your life again. The medical profession says that everyone has phobias. It's just that some people have them hidden. That is, they do not manifest themselves in any way. And in others, these fears run. They express themselves in form. And they greatly complicate a person's life. Thread was haunted by panic attacks since childhood. He lost his mother very early on. And then she passed away suddenly. His father was hit by a truck in broad daylight. Dad was returning from fishing on his bicycle and respected all the rules. But the tragedy could not be avoided. The news that Alex had been hit by a car spread instantly throughout the village. 9-year-old Nina rushed to the scene of the accident, gasping for breath and her heart overflowing with anxiety. But what she saw gave her a real shock. The little girl ran to her father and started screaming in terror, Dad, please don't die. I'll be lost without you. I'll do anything for you, but don't die. My father was still alive and even tried to smile. It's nothing, but we've been in more trouble than this. We'll get out of it. The ambulance arrived and the paramedics began emergency treatment. The strict paramedic shouted to the women in the village, what are you standing there for? Somebody take the girl away. She doesn't need to see this. Someone's strong arms lifted Nina up and carried her away. She was hysterical. Let me go to my father. He'll die without me. But a familiar voice tried to calm her. Nina, don't yell at Dad. It won't do any good. They'll take him to the hospital and treat him there. In the meantime, you'll stay with us. That voice belonged to a friend of Max's father. She didn't want to believe the man, so she calmed down. But all night long, she kept screaming. She had nightmares about her father. She wanted to save him from horrible creatures with fiery heads, but each time it started all over again. In the morning, she had a fever, and Uncle Max's wife nursed her for a week. The girl was sick, and when she felt a little better, she learned that her dad had died. The same afternoon after the terrible accident, Max took her to the cemetery and showed her her father's grave. The next day, a relative of her mother's, whom she had seen for the first time in her life, came to pick her up, and he took her with him. They took a long train ride, and Uncle Peter told her funny stories all the way. It was a proven way for the mother's stepbrother to distract his niece from bad thoughts. Nina, don't be afraid. You'll forget all the bad stuff in the new place. By the way, do you have a little sister? Her name is Christina. She's my daughter. She's about 3 years older than you, but I'm sure you'll become friends. Uncle Peter and his wife tried to surround her with love and care. They partly succeeded, and the child gradually came to her senses. A wonderful relationship has developed with Christina, the couple's daughter. But the past did not want to let Nina go, and it came to her in her dreams, even during the day when the girl was alone. A year passed, then another. But these terrible dreams were repeated with surprising regularity. So Peter's uncle decided to take his niece to a specialist. The child's psychologist talked with her for quite a while and then asked her to draw some pictures on a certain topic. Nina did not hear what Uncle Peter's doctor said after this test, but he prescribed her the beautiful pills, which she was to take twice a day. It is true that after this medicine, Nina became inhibited and scattered. Uncle Peter wanted to show her to the doctor again, but with a different profile. But then his wife, Aunt Sophia, came to the defense of the unfortunate. Stop abusing children. You don't need those pills. You should show it to Grandma, and she'll take them all away. Uncle Peter, don't you like that idea? Sophia, I didn't realize you were such a dunce. Only certified medical professionals can be entrusted with your health. The woman didn't give up. Doctors are often impotent. Therefore, do not neglect the proven folk methods. I myself, as a child from a fright grandmother, treated me. And Nina will help. I was given the address of a woman. They say that she cures from all sorts of scares. Sophia, that's nonsense. Even the most experienced doctor can't cure all diseases. That's why people turn to witch doctors when doctors refuse to treat hopeless patients. Uncle Peter didn't bother to argue with his wife and waved his hand for her to do whatever she wanted. But remember that you will be personally responsible for the consequences. Aunt Sophia was pleased with her victory and whispered to Nina, "On Saturday you and I will go to see a grandmother who will take away your fears. Don't be afraid of anything or anything. Listen to your uncle. He's big, but he's afraid of everything." Nina remembers very well a visit to an old woman who lived in a little village near the forest. The old woman whispered something to her for a long time. Then she sprinkled Nina with the water stipulated by the aunt. She said that the girl was very frightened. "We must bring her twice more." Aunt Sophia promised, "All right, we will try to come." But already after the first session, Nina felt better. She no longer had scary dreams and was not afraid to be alone in the room. Aunt Sophia watched her niece for a while, and then confidently said, "My friend, we're not going anywhere with you. Stop torturing yourself, you have suffered enough. Live, my daughter, and be happy." Nina tried hard to follow her aunt's advice. She studied diligently at school and then enrolled in a hairdressing course. Her older sister had already graduated in medicine and was very surprised at Nina's choice. She could have found a more respectable profession. With your diploma, you could have studied law or pedagogy, and you went into hairdressing. Nina gave a succinct answer. "I always wanted to beautify people." Actually, the reason for this choice was that she was in a hurry to become independent as soon as possible. Her aunt and uncle had done a lot for her. They had replaced her parents. But time was passing, and they were dressing up a lot, getting older. They both developed health problems, and Nina no longer wanted to be a burden to them. After finishing college, she got a job in a beauty salon, and a good salary allowed her to rent a room. But every weekend, the girl visited her relatives. The connection with them was not broken. And after Nina married Martin and permanently moved to another city. With her husband, the threads too, a very lucky one, despite the fact that he was older than her by a total of 15 years. Martin was engaged in road transport, and the family was never short of money. Savlieva bought a 2-room apartment on the secondary market and began to dream of having a child. But there were years with the continuation of labor. The case has not moved from a standstill. Spouses began to go to doctors' offices, but after a thorough examination heard the final verdict. Doctors are very sorry, but you cannot have children together. Nina. After the doctor's words, I experienced exactly the same shock as when I looked at my dying father in my childhood. This time her hope was dying, and she would not accept it and decided to argue with the doctor. "Doctor, if we have understood you correctly, do you think my husband and I are hopeless?" The doctor coughed for emphasis. "Exactly. But there are methods that allow people to become parents. You are right, there are such innovative methods, but in your case, their application is impossible due to the infertility of your spouse. Usually in such situations, donor material is recommended, but very rarely do our clinics accept this option. So what should we do?" The doctor was silent for a long time and then said in a tired voice, "I really want to help you. Believe me, I am speaking sincerely from the bottom of my heart. But the only thing I can advise you to do is to take the baby into foster care." Martin asked quietly, "So you are advising us to adopt a baby?" "That's exactly the best way to foster a newborn. Believe me, in that case the baby will become a real member of the family." Martin looked at his wife fondly. "I think the doctor is right. If we make even one little person happy, life won't be a waste." "I think so." Nina did not immediately accept her husband's decision. She hesitated for a few months, but then decided to consult her older sister. After all, Christina worked in this field and could not only give useful advice, but also render substantial help. In order to meet her sister, Nina even took a leave of absence from work and went to the city where she had spent the most beautiful years of her life. Christina met her sister at the train station and cheerfully informed her that you had arrived very successfully. "I mean our conversation with you." Nina did not want her plans to become public. She whispered to her sister Christina, It seems to me that the train station is not exactly a suitable place to discuss such matters. The relative waved her hand. Believe me, no one here cares about you. Even if you talk out loud about something out of the ordinary, no one will turn around. I started this conversation because we have to hurry. We have a 2-month-old baby. She's a little thin, but she's active. She was brought to us the other day, and there's already a queue of people wanting to adopt her. Nina felt an inexplicable fluttering in her chest. Christina, what do we do? We have to act. The first thing is to meet the baby. What if you don't like each other? Christina was joking, though. Nina felt a strong excitement again. This happens to people when they jump into the water or fly around the planet. But the young girl's fears were in vain, because the abandoned baby smiled and started walking at the sight of her. Nina hesitantly asked her sister Christina, "Can I hold her for a while?" "Of course you can." Those few minutes the woman remembered for the rest of her life. She barely held the little body in her arms. She felt an incredible surge of energy. Her heart was overflowing with a love of universal proportions. The little girl smiled at him again and said something to him in his incomprehensible language. Suddenly, she kissed the girl on the forehead. "I will not give you to anyone. From today, we will always be together with you." But it's one thing to say it and another to do it. The adoption proceedings were delayed. The bureaucrats in the army of civil servants kept finding fault or demanding new certificates. As a result, the couple had to settle for a month in Christina's small apartment. But the older sister assured that her family was used to the cramped conditions. "We spent 5 years in a 10-meter room in the dormitory, so we have not yet had time to get used to this house." Thanks to her sister's help, the adoption was arranged in a relatively short time. The 3 of them returned home, and Nina was thinking the whole way, it must be fate. Martin and I are fabulously lucky that Christina works. If it weren't for her, there's no telling how long we would have been looking for our baby. And now we have a baby girl, a woman who has suffered so much. I fanatically believed that with Mary's appearance in the family for all eternity, peace and happiness would reign. But these hopes were not fulfilled because Martin could not accept someone else's child. During the first year, he tried hard to be a father to Mary. But Nina saw that her husband did not do it because of the call of his heart. When the adopted daughter grew up and began to explore the world around her, the man became irritable. She stopped smiling and returned home as her daughter slept. Nina realized that something had to be done urgently to save the family. One day she said firmly to Martin, "We have to have a serious talk because we can't go on like this." The man immediately sank onto the couch. He wrapped his arms around his head in a kind of terrifying doom and said, "Nina, I'm sorry, but I haven't calculated my strength. I've tried, but I can't accept this child. As soon as I approach her, a hammer starts pounding on my temples. That girl is a stranger to you." Nina expected anything but this confession, but with numb lips she whispered to Martin, "What do we do now?" The man got up from the couch and started kissing her hands. "Nina, let's take the girl back to the place we took her from, okay? She's still little, she won't remember anything. She will still have a chance to have a family." The woman interrupted her husband's optimistic speech. "Martin, you make it sound like you and I borrowed a dog. You've had enough of it, and now you want to give it away to someone you know. That's no way to treat a dog, you know?" Nina didn't realize she was yelling. Her husband tried to calm her down. "Let's not get nervous now. It's a very complicated matter that can't be solved all at once. Martin, I've made a decision. I'm not going to tell on Maria." The man realized that he could not change his wife's mind and threw out with irritation, "Then I will have to leave this house." In the morning, Martin gathered his things and without a word to his wife disappeared forever from his life. The former spouses met 2 years later at the courthouse. At the divorce trial, the man with undisguised arrogance looked at Nina, and the fate of a single mother did not go in her favor. She does not look very good. Nina did not want to get into an argument with Martin, but did not miss the opportunity to poke him. "But you're divorced like a hog, and it's not a good life." Martin blushed 0. "You're not. You'd better thank me for leaving your floor. You might say I did it for free." Such insolence infuriated the woman to the depths of her soul, because she was still paying off the loan, which she herself foolishly contracted when she and her husband bought the apartment. She reminded the man of this, and he was immediately taken out of the mood, giving the woman the right. The court hearing lasted a little over an hour, and the spouses divorced by mutual consent. Nina fully assumed the responsibilities of raising an adopted daughter, and Martin voluntarily refused to fulfill his parental duties. Several years passed, and Nina learned that her ex-husband had remarried. Ironically, her new chosen one had 2 children from his first marriage. Only once did they meet by chance in a shopping mall. Martin was not ashamed and rushed to separate from his ex-wife as soon as possible. An apology is expected. The woman asked Martin, "Admit it, are you happy?" Martin shrugged his shoulders, unsure. "I don't know. I guess I'm happy." Nina took a long look at the man and thought bitterly that everyone had a different idea of happiness. Being in a cell-like capsule was very unpleasant. Nina waited impatiently for the young nurse to release her from the confined space. The machine whirred above the old woman's head, and the monotonous voice made her feel quite uncomfortable. Even though she had been warned not to move or speak, she did not control herself. "Girl, how much longer is this going to go on?" The nurse cheerfully told her that her torment was over. "Now can you get up with the girl's help?" Nina got up and began to dress. The nurse wrote something on her card, and at the same time shared her observations. "I have been working here for 3 years, and I never cease to be amazed. Smart people have invented this wonderful device, which allows to detect any disease at the earliest stage. The patients are still dissatisfied. Is it so hard to be patient for a few minutes?" Nina realized that the question was addressed to her. It's not difficult, of course, but it's very unpleasant to lie there and hear something buzzing above you. It sounds as if a needle is about to come out of nowhere and drink into your brain. The girl laughed. "You have a great imagination." A surprising trait for such a mature age. The patient smiled. "Thank you for sparing my life. But it seems to me, colleague, that tact is not always appropriate in a medical institution." The girl wondered, "Are you also a medical professional?" Nina replied with undisguised pleasure, "And I have devoted 45 years to medicine." These hands have claimed more than 100 new lives. To convince the woman showed the nurse. Her friendly hands, the girl looked respectfully. "The results of your examination will be ready in about 15 minutes. I will take them to your doctor myself." Nina thanked the nurse and went to the office, where her fate would soon be decided. She sat comfortably on a free couch and waited her turn. Nina had lived almost 7 decades and rarely complained about her health. In her younger years, she was a serious skier and was even a regional champion. With age, her hobbies changed a bit, but physical activity was always the basis of her lifestyle. Her coworkers often joke that our Nina has a jet engine in one place. With that activity, she will work until she is 100 years old. Matron herself was not swinging on those terms, and she also said it jokingly to her daughters. "I doubt until I'm 100, but I will work until they take me off the ward." When it came time to draw up the pension, Nina boldly declared, "I'll work alone for a while longer. It's boring to be between 4 walls." Everyone knew that the woman had no one but her niece. The clinic's management met her needs and extended her contract, and Nina continued to share her invaluable experience with the young addition. But she had barely passed her 7th decade, and her health was failing badly. Weakness, severe dizziness, loss of appetite appeared. For some time, the woman attributed these symptoms to age-related changes in the organism. But then he began to lose weight, and this alarming sign could not be ignored. Her strength was fading day by day, and she had to take a well-deserved vacation to distract herself from her sad thoughts. At first, Nina took to reading books and then sought the friendship of the women in the neighborhood. She believed that positive emotions would help her to improve her health, but to no avail, and the weight continued its rapid decline. There came a time when she fainted in the store. It was then that the woman decided to take serious care of her health. She had already undergone many tests, but the doctors could not determine the cause of her ailment. This question kept her awake at night. She tossed and turned sleeplessly, repeating, "Lord, why am I being punished? Wherein have I sinned before you?" Memory held different versions of transgressions, but all were insignificant except one. Nina tried to banish the unpleasant memories, but they began to disturb her consciousness more and more often. To rid herself of this pleasure, she decided to consult an expert woman. Wendy was a very devout woman who always attended Sunday and holiday services at the local church. After listening to Nina, Dove told her, "You have to take communion. Tell your sins to the bishop, cleanse your soul, and believe me, you will feel better right away." The neighbor spoke so convincingly that she believed her and went along with her to the service on Sunday. But at the most crucial moment, when she had to tell the priest about her criminal act, which she had committed 12 years ago, the woman screamed. She still remembers the priest's piercing look and his words, "Repent, sister, and you will feel better." But instead of repenting, Nina murmured in confusion, "I'm sorry, I can't." "Maybe another time, Wendy, but maybe another time," she said. "Maybe another time, Wendy," but then she rebuked her. "You shouldn't be like that, Nana. Our sins keep us from living. They weigh heavily on our hearts." Nina timidly objected, "Because there are different kinds of sins, and maybe my offense is not as serious as it seems. I did it for pure motives. Tell me, what is your sin?" The woman was about to open her soul to her neighbor, but she noticed curiosity in his eyes. And she thought that if she did not trust the father, then this Wendy should not open her secret. "It will spread throughout the neighborhood than me." Nina was even mentally afraid to call herself a criminal. She again withdrew into herself, trying to find other ways to escape from her obsessive thoughts. The office door opened and the nurse called her name. The standing woman walked over to the desk where the caped doctor sat. The doctor didn't even look at the elderly patient and nodded to her. "Sit down." The woman sat down and watched the doctor, who was writing something in illegible handwriting. 5 minutes passed. Finally, the doctor put aside the previous patient's chart and began to read the results of Nina's examination. As he studied the conclusion, his face became increasingly grim. He looked at the patient and immediately looked away. "Unfortunately, Nina, I have nothing to please you. To be frank, the situation is very bad." The old woman felt a tremor throughout her body. "I have cancer." The doctor kept silent and looked away from the window. The patient had to repeat the same question. "Doctor, I have cancer." "You are too late. It's advanced. It has metastasized. Given your age, doctor, I understand. I've also worked in medicine for almost half a century. Can you tell me how much time I have left?" Unfortunately, that's a question no one can answer, and I don't advise you to prepare for an imminent end. With proper treatment, you can slow down the process. And will you still have a few years left to enjoy your loved ones? "I have no one." "Thank you, doctor, for your frank answer. I will consider whether I should receive treatment." The doctor was surprised at the woman. What kind of reflection can there be in a situation where even one day is important? "I am writing you a referral for urgent hospitalization." "Doctor, can I come back tomorrow? I have some business to take care of." The doctor disagreed. "Okay, I'll let you go until tomorrow." "I'll let you go until tomorrow." Nina couldn't remember how she had gotten to her apartment. She wanted to cry so badly, but there were no tears. She sat on the couch prostrate until evening. Then she reached for her cell phone. Her usual friends had forgotten about her. She hadn't even called anyone, so the phone lay orphaned, waiting for its owner to remember it. In her dresser drawer, the woman frantically searched for her niece's number, as long as she didn't change it. Luckily, after the first beep, the phone rang with a familiar voice. "Aunt Miranda, is something wrong?" Nina felt tears rolling down her cheeks with 2 hands. "My grandfather has diagnosed me with a serious illness. It is heaven's punishment for a grave sin. Aunt Miranda, don't despair. I will come to see you tomorrow. Kathy, I won't be home. I'm going to be hospitalized. But it doesn't matter. I'll come tomorrow. And please don't fill your head with nonsense." Kathy kept her word. And the next day, she showed up at her relative's room at lunchtime. She brought with her 2 bags of fruit, Juice's kissed aunt, and cheerfully said, "Here is a supply of vitamins, so that all this will be destroyed in 2 days." Nina looked at her niece hopefully. "Will you come to see me again?" "Of course I will. How could I leave you alone?" Kathy, my dear, why are you showing me so much favor? Because last time I treated you so badly. Nina burst into tears. Kathy stroked her gray head and soothed her like a child. Don't cry. I don't hold a grudge. And it's been so many years. Why remember the past? Objected the aunt. How can you not remember it if it doesn't give you peace? These memories upset me. I never believed in magic and other nonsense, and now I believe it. My illness is a punishment for a terrible sin I committed when I had a sound mind and a strong memory. Kathy was worried about her aunt's condition, but she couldn't wait to tell her biggest secret, and the niece had to give in to her aunt. But as the woman told her terrible secret, terror gripped her. Kathy, please don't interrupt me. You're the only one I can trust. Maybe you can correct my mistake, Aunt. I'll try if it's in my power. Nina covered her eyes and began her confession. It happened 12 years ago, if we don't count another 2 months and a few days. My shift was coming to an end when my shift partner called to tell me she was having problems with her family. She asked me to fill in for her, promising that I would work the substitute's shift afterward. I agreed. There were only 7 laboring women in the room and one 18-year-old bimbo who kept saying she didn't want to have a baby. She ran out of the room several times and asked me to give her a pen and paper. She wanted to write a cancellation, but I explained the rules and she seemed to calm down. I had a cup of tea and pulled myself together. Then I got a call from the emergency room. They had brought in a woman with kinks. Well, it's not the first time. And of course I didn't hesitate. I thought I could handle it myself. The baby was born very weak. She took a chance and died. Mom is hysterical, says she's had IVF 3 times. The first 2 times she had miscarriages, so the 3rd pregnancy she was in labor. She took a couple of days off to go home. It was my husband's anniversary, and then she went into labor. I did everything I could to calm the unfortunate one down, advised her to try again. But she said it was the last attempt because she was at the limit of her age. Nina kept quiet, and Kathy thought she had fallen asleep. But the woman wrinkled her nose painfully and asked for water. She quenched her thirst and continued. While calming that mother, the girl who was going to write the cancellation went into labor, and that's when I made a fatal mistake. I again relied on my experience and did not call the on-call doctor. Although what could help the district therapist in that difficult situation? The delivery was quick, and it turned out that the baby girl walked with a double. The first child came into the world safe and sound, immediately screaming. With the second baby, I had to struggle while taking care of her. My young parturient started to bleed. The situation was critical, but my brain was working like a computer. The first woman was still in the delivery room, and I suggested she take the baby from the twin. There was no time to think about it, because the resuscitation team had to be called urgently. The woman understood the complexity of the situation and agreed immediately. She even promised to thank me generously. Then Nina paused again. Kathy said, Tia, you are very tired. You need to rest. Don't worry. I'll sit here, and then you can tell me what happened. The woman gave them a big smile. What happened next was nothing special. They took the young mother to intensive care, but they couldn't save her. The girl did not plan to become a mother from the beginning. She was not registered at the antenatal clinic. Later it became known, according to her friends, that she tried several times to get rid of the pregnancy, but the twins turned out to be very lively. And how the lucky mother thanked her. The aunt smiled again. Not like I found her later in the archives. Turns out this lady was the wife of a big boss. When she saw me, she started screaming up and down the street that I was an extortionist. She threatened to call the police. And how did that turn out? Nothing. I gave up and wished her well. I saw her around town a lot after that, but she always pretended she didn't know me. But I'm proud to, so I didn't try to be friends with her anymore. At first, however, I wanted very much to tell her husband everything, but then I changed my mind. I imagined how they would vent their anger on the child, and I lost all desire to defend the truth. The more the aunt opened the veil of secrecy, the clearer the picture became for Kathy. She collated some of the facts she knew and realized who the woman was. What remained unclear was the fate of the second child. But Nina shook her head, Kathy. It is this circumstance that weighs most heavily on me. I would probably give the rest of my life without regret to know anything about the second child. All I know is that she was sent to the nursing home because she was so weak. God only knows what happened to her afterwards. Kathy returned home with a strange feeling of emptiness. She did not accuse her aunt of any crime, although what she had done fell into that category. I don't know how I would have acted in my aunt's place, but how could I tie the ends of the same rope together? There were many more questions Kathy was trying to answer. She realized that no one gave her the right to interfere in people's destinies, but she could not remain indifferent. For a moment, she imagined how she would carry her aunt's secret for years, and she realized that she had to do everything possible to reunite her sisters. This year's autumn came unexpectedly yesterday. The sun was shining brightly, sparing no heat. But in the morning, the sky was covered with clouds and it began to rain. Maria looked out of the window. "Mom, why is everything in life so unfair? I thought the weather would be nice on September 1, but the weather is so bad I don't even want to go out." Nina smiles. A famous song says that nature doesn't have bad weather. That's what the song says, but in real life it's different. It's good for you, Mom, that you're hiding in your living room now. And I'm stuck on the line in the rain. Nina put the omelette on the plates. "Sit down, my sufferer, for breakfast to share your grief. I'm going to school for the line too." Maria is hanging from her mother's neck. It's so cool. Too bad we don't have a camera. Otherwise, you would have photographed me a couple of times. The woman smiled enigmatically again. And now a moment, attention. There will now be a singing magic session. Pick up Maria's phone. The little girl was speechless at the sight of a small box in her mother's hands. "Mommy, it's amazing. A real smartphone is amazing, but it's very expensive." Maria pushed the box with the device away from her. Nina reassured her daughter. "Don't worry, everything is fine. I've paid off all the loans and decided to give you a senior gift. By the way, I have some regular clients who have also been doing their hair at home. They pay me a little extra for special services." Maria lost her appetite and couldn't take her eyes off the wonderful box. "Mom, when I grow up, will I buy you a car?" "No, I'll give you a whole living room and you'll own it." Nina wanted to thank her daughter for her good intentions, but she didn't have time to do it, because Maria suddenly asked Mom, "You think this girl who looks like me? She has her own smartphone." The woman was taken aback. "Maria, why do you remember this girl?" "Sometimes I dream about her. She says we are sisters." As Nina pondered, Maria continued, "Once I dreamed we were walking together. Then she asked me in a dream to go see her. Daughter, they're just dreams. You shouldn't believe them." The girl was confused, so she was unable to give a coherent answer. "I have read that there are prophetic dreams in which everything is fulfilled exactly down to the smallest detail. Mom, after all, nothing prevents you and me from going to this city." "I looked on the map. It's not far from here. We can walk," said Nina as sternly as possible. "I don't think we should go out of our way for a video clip. At least that kind of trip is not on my agenda right now. Let's finish our breakfast and get out of here." All day long, this conversation with my daughter had been a nuisance. I was taking care of a customer. I was thinking about that other girl. The thought was so thick in the woman's mind that she couldn't take it anymore and called her sister. "Christina, I need to ask you something." "What is it?" "Tell me what's on your mind." "It's not convenient on the phone." I heard Christina sigh. "More secrets." "Then let's talk on the phone." "Sister, you know my finances are tight." "Oh, wait, I can ask my neighbor." "Oh, that's great. Call me tonight and we'll talk." At the appointed time, Nina told her daughter she had to go out for a while. Maria didn't mind. She was busy with her new smartphone. "Mom, don't worry, I won't get bored. You can even go on a date. Aren't you tired of always being at home?" murmured the woman, young enough to give advice to adults. Trying not to make too much noise, Nina rang the doorbell next door. Molly looked at the visitors in surprise. "Nina, what's wrong again?" "No, we're fine. We just need your help again to sweeten an awkward moment." The guest pulled out a beautiful box of chocolates. The neighbor smiled at the painful trio of fillies filled with walnuts. "I'm an unconditional fan of this treat. Thanks, Nina. You're welcome. What's your problem? I need to make a call to a friend. No, not a friend, my sister. Now bear with me for 6 seconds. Sure enough, after a complicated manipulation by Aunt Dina, Christina appeared on the screen. She waved her hand in greeting. Hello, Nina, to you and your neighbor. Go on, say it. Something's come up. Nina gave an expressive look to the landlady, who hastened to erase it all with Teratorkin. I won't disturb you. I'll go put on some tea. Nina made sure that there were no extra ears in the room and hurried to tell her sister the gist of the case. Christina, try to find out where Maria came from and under what circumstances. 25 again. Why are you stirring up the past? Also, your Maria's life, though modest, is quite settled. But find out the truth. And what will that change? Christina, you see, some circumstances have come to light that have made me take this step. The fact is that my Maria most likely has a sister. Nina briefly told her about that clip with the girl, who was an exact copy of her adopted daughter. Kristina Petrovna did not respond immediately. I must admit that I was dumbfounded, but I will try to find out everything quickly, although it will be difficult for me to do so. After all, access to the archives is only open to a separate list of people, and I haven't worked there for a long time. You still haven't told your mother that you're not related to her. Not yet. I can't decide. And it's wrong because I don't have anyone else in the world who is related to that girl. I understand. You'll hear from me in a couple of days. Next communication session. Nina waited with a fanatical desire to get to the truth, and her patience was rewarded. Her sister called a day earlier than promised. Nina, are you standing? What is there to swear then? I have so much news for you that you may not be able to stand. I've seen a lot of melodramas on TV, but I didn't expect such a story to unfold in front of my eyes. Anyway, this morning I went on your errand, and I came face to face with a lady who was also interested in the events of 12 years ago. Nina tensed up, and her heart was pounding so hard she couldn't make out what her sister was saying. Meanwhile, Christina kept pouring out information. There is no 100% certainty, but we can assume there are 2 of them. So she's a twin of another girl who is also being raised in foster care. But it's a complicated story, so I think you need to meet that woman and talk to her. Nina had not yet realized what her sister had told her. Speechless, she repeated over and over again. Yes, of course. Anyway, I'll give you this lady's phone number and you'll make arrangements with her. Whenever it's convenient for you to meet. Daria didn't know what to do with herself. The beginning of the school year didn't make her happy because the class was as boring as last year. It was better to watch TV, even if there was only trash on the program. I can't wait for Daddy to come. How many times have I asked him to take me somewhere? He doesn't have time. Daria texted from corner to corner. Suddenly, she remembered Kathy and almost burst with longing. If I hadn't messed with her, she wouldn't have run away from us. Right now, I'd give anything for some sultana raisin oatmeal, which only Kathy could make so deliciously. I wonder where she is now. Daria started rummaging through her desk drawer, which was in chaos. Where's the damn note? I remember I didn't throw it away. Finally, after a long search, the girl retrieved a crumpled piece of paper from a selection of notebooks. She began to smooth it out, saying, "Here's Kathy's phone number. Now I'm going to call her and tell her what I'm going to tell her to make it sound credible. I'm going to tell her that my English is a mess." Daria realized that wasn't exactly a good reason to start the course. But there was no other option, and determinedly she dialed the former governess's number. Kathy answered no immediately. "Daria, weren't you expecting your call?" "No, it's all right." "Kathy, hi, I wouldn't bother you, but my English is a complete mess." "Have you changed?" They don't use literary words. If it cuts off your ears, I'm sorry, really, but I just wanted to hear from you, to know how you're doing in the capital of our region. And I'm looking forward to seeing you too. Daria felt something protective in her eyes, and her voice trailed off. "It's not true. I want to see you. That's a bad thing. Dad is always busy and the new maid comes every other day. She cleans and cooks well. Still, it was better with you. Daria, I'll definitely come v. Arkhipov, as soon as I get a chance." Did the girl ask when you'll get that chance? Maybe at the end of this week. Don't cry, I beg you very much. All right, I'll try. After a brief conversation with Kathy, Daria's mood improved a little. She decided to please her father and set the table for dinner. Anthony was surprised at his daughter. There's nothing wrong with you. Yes, if you're surprised that I decided to be a bit of a hostess. I confess I was favorably affected by Kathy's call. Kathy called you. How's she doing? I don't know the details, but she said she's fine. She works for the company as a translator. She's not married yet. Wow, you even asked me that question. Don't you think it's unseemly for young girls to ask about other people's private lives? Daria put her hands to her sides and defiantly asked Dad, "Is it decent to leave your only daughter alone in this huge house? I'll soon die of boredom." Anthony realized that the conversation was taking on an unpleasant tone. "Daughter, I promise that next weekend you and I will go out together. If you want, we'll go fishing or to the regional center. There's plenty of entertainment there." Daria gave him a mischievous look. "Next time we'll go fishing, but this Sunday we'll go to the park with you. And what will we do there? You'll relax and watch your daughter work." "Dad, I've been asked to organize a fall dance in the park. I'll wear the same dress I wore with Kathy to the opening of the art center. The idea of a day out is much appreciated, Anthony. Thank you, daughter, for the invitation. But you must realize that my person will attract unnecessary attention." "Dad, is it hard for you to say a few words?" "No, it's not. Let's just say you've convinced me." Both father and daughter were looking forward to Sunday. The opening was scheduled for 11 o'clock, but Daria left the house an hour early. "Dad, try not to be late, or you'll miss all the fun." The man watched from the window as his daughter gracefully walked through the puddles left by yesterday's rain. He had always loved this activity, and now he admired the girl with a thrill in his heart. Soon as a bird, she will fly away from this house. And you, Anthony, will be left alone, though he had long since given up on himself. But as the years passed, more and more often the thought came to his mind that it was wrong not to have a life of his own. The man put on a strict jacket and looked critically at his reflection. The mayor was also a human being, and perhaps he deserved attention and understanding. There were already many citizens in the park. It was only a few minutes before the event, and Anthony tried to find his daughter with his eyes. Suddenly, on one of the paths, he saw his daughter's face and waved to her. Strangely, his daughter did not respond to his greeting and even turned away. The man muttered, "What's the matter? Hasn't she noticed me?" His elevated status did not allow him to shout or take other actions that could be taken badly. So Antonio headed towards the road where the daughter had passed. He was greeted by the townspeople and responded to everyone with a smile and warm words. This distracted the mayor, who finally lost sight of his daughter. Suddenly, a woman's voice sounded nearby. "Maria, get out of the way. Can't you see you are disturbing the people?" Antonio turned around abruptly and froze in astonishment. In front of him stood a girl like two peas in a pod, similar to Daria. Only her hair was shorter and her attire different. For a moment he felt dizzy, but was pulled out of his unpleasant state by the same female voice. "Are you sick? You've gone very pale." "Maria, give it to me. You will see that the man feels sick." Anthony looked at the woman, then at the girl named Maria, and closed his eyes sharply. When he cautiously opened his eyes, the couple was still watching him from the side of the stage. Triumphant music was heard, and Daria Anthony jumped onto the stage to applause. "Hello, my favorite Arkhipov. We're having a party today, and my friends, and I want to give you all a good mood." A burst of applause spread through the park. Anthony still had not managed to get away from the mom with the girl who looked so much like his daughter. At first, this fact didn't even strike him as odd, and he wanted to approach the stage. But Maria said in a very loud voice, Mom, look, it's the girl from the video. Can I come closer? I really want to meet her." The woman tried to hold the girl. "Maria, let's put the introductions on hold. Your interference could interfere with the festivities." "Mom, I'll watch quietly." "Don't you realize this is the girl who asked me in her dreams to come?" The woman was confused and looked to Anthony for support. "It's a striking resemblance, isn't it? The hostess at the party looks a lot like my daughter. I wonder how old she is." Something very painful crushed the man's throat. He loosened the knot in his tie. "This is my daughter Daria. She turned 12 in May." The woman rejoiced, "And my Maria's birthday is in early June. She and I and another acquaintance are traveling to her city. And what exactly attracted you to this city? If it's no secret." The woman didn't have time to answer because the host invited the mayor on stage. Anthony walked back down the path, only in the opposite direction. Behind him came a murmur. He saw the mayor's daughter and that girl. She's a lot alike. The only way that could happen is if those young women were twins. The man had heard it all, but he had no right to reply to people's comments. There was no way for him to stop or leave the park. During the short drive he had made to the site of the next performance, Anthony had had time to change his mind, but he wasn't naive enough to believe in coincidence. Daria couldn't see or even guess what was going on down there by the ramp. She was enjoying her next moment of glory and reveling in the applause and appreciative crowd. When Anthony took the stage, he handed her the microphone, and she mentioned herself on the sidelines. Throughout her many years in a position of responsibility, Anthony realized that ordinary people appreciate more sincere words that come from the heart. He did not abuse the attention of the audience and briefly greeted everyone present. "On this beautiful September day, I would like to wish all of you, dear compatriots, a festive atmosphere. And may all the homes of our dear city be bright and welcoming." The voices of his children rang out. The party continued, and Antonio began to think feverishly about what he should do next. His head was splintering with all sorts of thoughts. When he saw Kathy at his side, Kathy, Anthony, if only for a second, forgot everything because Kathy impressed him. There was something very different about her, as if she were a compressed spring. Kathy held her head high, her gaze straight and open. But seconds passed, and Anthony let out a long sigh. It would be interesting, of course, to chat with her, to find out how she was doing. But that didn't matter to him at the moment. He was about to tell Kathy. Daria walked past him. She almost made the mistake of running him over, literally bumping into Kathy. She smiled and hugged Daria. "So you keep carrying everything in your path." A while ago, Daria would have been offended, even responded rudely. Now she was smiling. "Kathy, did you see my performance?" "Of course I saw it, and I wasn't the only one." Kathy looked at Anthony, who was staring at the girl his daughter looked so much like. "Anthony, if you're looking for Maria and her mother, they're waiting for us at the cafe on the boardwalk." The man turned slowly toward Kathy. He felt the earth tremble beneath his feet. All the worst suspicions were beginning to come true. Had she hit her head? No, he doesn't want to know anything, let alone change anything. Daria is his daughter, and no other situation interests him. He was about to tell Kathy, but suddenly the thought came to his mind that maybe Daria is his daughter. And that girl too, although it wasn't impossible. He had been several times to ultrasounds with his wife, and had clearly seen a boy. "Kathy, I'm sorry, but Daria and I can't go today." Kathy interrupted him. "Anthony, we have to. You realize it's better to talk. They're not accusing you of anything. People just want to know the truth. And the man who caused all this wants to be rid of this sin before he dies." Daria looked fearfully at her father. "Dad, what is he talking about?" Kathy smiled at him. "Daria, are you afraid? You've never been afraid of anything. If your father decides to do it, there's someone I'm going to introduce you to." Daria's in a pose. Actually, she has friends waiting for her. Well, I don't know, maybe she doesn't want to meet anyone. I've got Anthony interrupting Daria's daughter. "We're going to have to go because I'm not going to be able to sleep well now anyway." "Dad, what's wrong?" He shrugged his shoulders. If Mom were alive, she could probably shed some light on all this. After saying that, Daria calmed down. Kathy and Anthony stepped forward, with Daria trailing behind. "Kathy, what did you have to do with this?" "I had nothing to do with it. My aunt. We don't socialize enough to know the details, or I used to. And now that my aunt is dying, I wanted to know if the other girl was alive. It just so happened that we all met at the same time. Together, we were able to discover many interesting things. The man was completely lost. He didn't know what he was going to hear. But of one thing he was sure, it was not good. They approached the summer cafe, and then they heard Mom, "Look, there she is." Daria stopped. She looked at the man who had spoken. Then she looked at her father. "Dad, who is it?" "I thought it was just a dream." "I've dreamed about her several times." Anthony convinced his daughter. "I don't know the rest either. I hope it all becomes clear now." He turned his eyes to Maria's mother and froze. Nina was looking at Daria with a kind of greediness. She slowly shifted her gaze to him. "Anthony." Kathy looked at them in confusion. "I don't understand. Do you two know each other?" Anthony nodded slowly. They hastened to add, "We only crossed paths a couple of times. That was a long time ago." The woman couldn't tell that about 8 years ago, Anthony had somehow been drawn back to her city. And lucky for her, at her beauty salon, she needed to get in shape because, she said, she was about to grow pigtails for her job. Nina and the other girls tried to explain to him that it was a women's salon, but Anthony wouldn't listen to anyone. So Nina, in order not to make a fuss with such a client, offered to cut his hair. She left a very generous tip and then apologized, saying it had been a hard day. And an hour later, negotiations. Apparently, the negotiation was over before it began. Because when she left, Anthony was waiting for her. Anthony was never much of a go-getter, but this time it was like he was on a roll. And Nina wouldn't let the men near her. And here she thought they were newcomers, so no one owed anyone anything. They actually only saw each other 3 times. And then Anthony went off to his own town. Nina tried to put it out of her mind. And now that he was in front of her, she looked at him in confusion. She thought about the fact that 5 minutes ago it had seemed to her that her problems were of universal proportions. But now they had become of totally inexplicable proportions. Everyone sat down at the table. Maria and Daria couldn't take their eyes off each other. Kathy's gaze immediately went to the professor. "I think it's best if the girls go outside, let them talk. While we're here solving adult problems." Neither Daria nor Maria. They didn't argue. They went downstairs. And the last thing Kathy heard was, "What kind of ice cream do you like?" "I'm from school." "You're kidding. I just eat it too." Kathy smiled. "How much less do rule kids have frosting and stuff? What's to stop them from communicating in a second?" Kathy had already sat down at the table. "Well, who's going to start?" Anthony raised his hand. "Let me do it. Daria's daughter is mine and my spouse's. I took care of her throughout her pregnancy. We went to the doctor together, so we have nothing criminal. I'm sure science will find many explanations for this similarity." Nina nodded. "I would like to support Anthony. We also took Maria from the orphanage." Would anyone really believe that Anthony's family separated the children? Surely there's an explanation. Kathy sighed. "Let me get started then." Anthony looked at his former housekeeper. "Yes, Kathy, I'd like to know why we're here." "My aunt has been a midwife all her life." Nina listened attentively to Anthony, and as the story progressed, lowered her head. That's how she knew Adriana was capable of doing strange things. But in order not to tell her that her son had died, the man averted his gaze to the girls, who were sitting on the bench and talking animatedly. When they were side by side, the resemblance was entirely undeniable. Kathy finished, then added, "It so happened that my aunt's remorse and your meeting coincided. Now I can tell you that the other girl is fine. It's up to you to sue her or not. But she's not going to get a trial anyway." Anthony smiled sadly. Why would he sue her? She made a few people happy, at least for a while. Would the girls have been better off in an orphanage? Kathy stood up. "Then I guess I'll be going. No need to go to Auntie's house. I'm sure you two have a lot to talk about." When she left, Anthony felt confused. There was music and voices nearby, and he looked at Nina, confused. "What do we do now?" Nina didn't have time to answer, because a loud, indignant voice could be heard nearby. "Anthony, I've been looking for you. You can't just disappear. You've got the wrong status." Next to the table was Vanessa. At another time, Anthony would have been happy to see her, but not now. "Vanessa, hi. I have the day off today, and I thought I'd spend it with my daughter. What's up with you?" Vanessa couldn't take her eyes off Nina. Inside, everything was churning. She had been looking for years for a way to get closer to Anthony, as they say, little by little, and here she was planning to spend with her daughter. Vanessa invited the tongue, but it was too late. Anthony's gaze became one. Everything she had worked so hard to build between them crumbled in an instant. Vanessa, are you forgetting? I'm sorry, Anthony, you've got it all wrong. Vanessa hurried out, but when she came down the steps, she froze. There were two Doria sitting across from her. True, one was a little thinner and didn't look quite so brazen. The woman turned around. She looked at the couple seated at the Euless table, narrowed her eyes. Well, that got rid of the mayors. She walked briskly down the path, plotting a plan in her head in case things didn't go her way. Doria gave Vanessa a dirty look. Maria immediately asked, "Who is that?" "That's my father's assistant, who sleeps and dreams of moving in with us." "Why, he doesn't have a home of his own." Doria laughed. "Maria, you're kidding. She wants to be the mayor's wife, that is, my father's wife." Maria even blushed, then burst out laughing. "I understand that she doesn't stand a chance. I won't let that happen." Anthony finally looked at Nina. "Hi, Nina." "Hi, Tony." Nina averted her eyes in embarrassment. This was definitely someone she never thought she'd see again in her life. Then it all came up. Maria, the illness, her husband leaving her. Tony, for her, it was a breath of air, a kind of exercise. But Nina clearly understood that it was before exercise and nothing more. When they were saying goodbye, Anthony asked, "We'll see each other again." Nina then shrugged her shoulders. "Why? We both get some rest, relax, and that's it." He nodded. He's right. At home, his wife and daughter were waiting for him. And all in all, frankly speaking, Anthony didn't realize how it had all turned out. It was as if something had hit him over the head, so he decided to forget it all as well. I think we need to figure out what to do next. We can't just leave because our daughters will have too many questions. And it wouldn't be right. They're twins. Nina sighed. They lived in peace. And here they were. She didn't understand how things would go on. How to explain to the girls that, although they were sisters, they would have to live in different cities and with different families. I don't know what's next. Maria is my daughter, and that says it all. Anthony looked somberly at Nina. Doria is my daughter, but that doesn't stop them from being sisters. Nina agreed and nodded. And the man asked Nina, "Where are you staying?" "I haven't been anywhere yet. I'm sure we'll be here for more than a day." "Maybe you should come to our house. We have a big house, plenty of room for everyone. It'll give us time to figure out what to do next. This is awkward." "What will your wife say?" "Adriana died a few years ago, so apart from the housekeeper, no one ever goes there." When the girls heard they were going to Doria's house from behind, they jumped up and down and squealed. Wistfully thought again that nothing would happen like before. In the evening, when the girls had settled into Doria's room, Anthony picked up the wine. "Nina, maybe we should have a little drink, so to speak, to take the edge off the nervous system." Nina nodded. They sat by the fireplace and Anthony spoke. "The biggest shock for me was that my wife didn't tell me anything. I lost my son, but I lived and knew nothing about it. I love Doria very much. She is my family. How could someone do this to me? And why? Why didn't she take both girls? For a while we thought we were never going to have children. We went to all kinds of doctors. The last one seemed to be a success. Adriana said when it was done that it was the last time. She said there would be no more attempts. Apparently it was out of desperation. Nina was quiet for a while. When I took Maria, I was told the girl was sick and weak. I agreed to everything. I was going to treat her all her life. My husband was sterile, and so we decided to take the baby." Nina smiled sadly. Actually, it was his idea. "It took me a long time to decide. I kept thinking I wouldn't be able to love my baby. As the years went by, I accepted. When I took Maria in my arms, I realized that I was willing to do anything for her. Love at first sight." Anthony looked at her husband. Her husband lived with us for a while when Maria started to grow up. He left. He said he couldn't love her, and that I should choose Maria or him. Anthony gasped. How? How can you put such a choice in front of a person?" Nina shrugged. "Well, it's like this. I'm going to rest. Too many things today. My head is spinning. Sure, go ahead. Tell him Maria has a heart defect. The doctors promised that with the transition age it should go away. But for now, we're on medication. The next day, Anthony left while everyone slept. Vanessa greeted him with a cold smile. She couldn't contain herself. Next to Anthony, she saw only herself. And here was a complete stranger. Good morning, Vanessa. Give me the details of the best pediatric cardiologist in the world. She closed the door behind her and the maid's mouth dropped open. Is Daria sick? I wish she were. That's just nonsense. Vanessa immediately twitched. What a lot of thoughts were going through her head. She picked up the phone and immediately calmed down. Running errands for her boss was something she was very good at. Nina decided that they would return home in the afternoon. After all, it was possible to agree over the phone. What was there to negotiate? She wasn't going to change anything. Girls, they could be long-distance friends. And she wanted very much to leave because Anthony's presence near her made her not revolt about herself. What nonsense was going through her head? They had no relationship that could be remembered simply by meeting on a physiological level. An inner voice whispered viciously. A lot of people wanted to meet you on that level. Somehow you turned them all down, but not him. But the plans didn't come to fruition. After lunch, which they had prepared with the girls, Anthony arrived. Nena, get ready. There's a very good pediatric cardiologist waiting. Let him take a look at Maria. Nina wanted to refuse, but then changed her mind. No need for unnecessary consultations. The doctor insisted on a more thorough examination, and they had to stay a few more days. And later the doctor called them back to his office. I have nothing to tell them. Most of the time these problems end when the child is in transition. But in very rare cases, probably 1 in 5,000, not the other way around, they get worse. This is how her child's illness progressed. Nina looked at the doctors with confusion, but they told her, I understand. But if you doubt my competence, ask the attending physician to order tests, not to wait for everything to go away. What do? We have to operate. We can do it here. But you realize that the heart is not the stomach. It's too risky. If you don't operate, you don't have to operate. Maria will not die like in the soap opera. It's just that her lifestyle will be very different from that of her peers. And of course, any nervous shock, too much fatigue, and many other factors could be fatal. We can think. Of course, they left the clinic, and then Anthony spoke. Nena, it's up to you, of course. But think about it. Such an opportunity to give Mary a chance to live like everyone else, to run. Have fun. I'm everything. Nina wiped away tears. She tried not to think about anything bad. In the evening, she talked with Maria. The girl's eyes lit up immediately. Mommy, they're going to let me ride the highest carousel. Besides, Daria and I have decided to go climbing. Nina sighed. Her daughter was right. She wants to live a full life. In the morning during breakfast, Anthony was watching the news. Suddenly he froze. Nina froze too. She asked for the weekend for now. The housekeeper said she would at least cook to pay him back for living here. The local news was on TV and they were showing their girls there. The announcer was broadcasting cheerfully. It seems our mayor or his wife had a wild youth. It's not clear why we only know of one boy. The answer is simple. Just then, a cardiac clinic appeared on the screen. Where did Maria come from? The announcer's voice reached a climax. It's very simple. The second child is sick, and it seems that the parents have abandoned her. Before the announcer could finish, Anthony's phone rang. Sure enough, it was Stephen. Anthony, what's going on there? Good morning, Stephen. There's nothing wrong. Do you watch television? Of course I do, and I will even prosecute the journalists for defamation. The governor has slowed down a bit. I'll wait for you at my house. As soon as you can leave. Anthony turned off the phone, sighed, I have to go to the region. Nina's angry, he said, God, now you're in trouble because of us. That's ridiculous. What's that got to do with you? It's a shame we can't meet Maria. Who would have thought? What kind of technology? I thought you had to be in the hospital for 6 months after heart surgery. Anthony was glad that Maria was okay, but he was also upset because he realized that there was no longer anything to keep them in this town. which meant they would have to part very soon. Anthony is very used to having two Darias at home. He knew the other one was Maria, but they looked very much alike. He got used to late-night conversations in the kitchen with Nina. He had not realized before how interesting Nina was. He had to stay in the region after a conversation with the governor, which, by the way, even brought them closer together. There were other pressing matters. Daria was not worried about Daria. She knew Nina would take care of everything, and she flew home as if on wings. It had been a long time since she had the feeling that a whole family was waiting for her at home. Anthony stopped in front of the door. Family? Yes, of course. Only now did he realize why everyone felt so good in the house. Because they felt like family. That's what it was all about. You don't have to make anything up. You just have to be a family. Nina would make the best wife. He really hoped the woman wouldn't reject him. It's not about her as a hostess and mother, but as a woman. But why did it take her so long to realize it? After all, from the very moment they had seen each other for the second time recently, he had already realized that he didn't want to let her go. And it wasn't even because of Maria. Anthony opened the door. It was unusually quiet in the house, and he entered the room. Daria was sitting quietly on the couch. "Hello, Daria, where is everyone?" Daria looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Dad, they're gone. They've gone all the way home. When we were like this, Dad didn't do anything to make them stay. You could have, I know, because you don't care about anyone or anything but your job." He couldn't find anything to say to his daughter, so he raised his voice. Daria calmed down immediately. Daria wiped her eyes. "That's right, Dad. How else could you hide your misdeed without yelling at the child?" Daria disappeared into her room. Anthony stared in confusion at Daria's door. In the evening, Daria did not come out of her room. Anthony knocked on her door. "Daria, let's have dinner." "Thanks, Dad. I don't want to." Neither did he. "Let's eat." Anthony had never thought he would be so lonely without Nina and Maria. He hardly slept at night. He wondered what Nina was doing now. Would she remember him? Daria went out for a quiet breakfast. Anthony couldn't help himself. "Daria, have you called Maria? How are they doing?" "She's doing well." "Dad?" Daria, yes, she had tea and got up before nightfall. Daria, Dad. The daughter's gone. Anthony felt like he was to blame for her. And not just her, but everyone. He pounded his fist on the table. "After all, I'm a grown man and I can afford to do whatever I want." He caught up with Daria already at the school gate, stopping beside her. His daughter looked at him in surprise. "Something happened at Dad's house. Are you okay?" "Yes, but not today." "It in the car. Why? Where are we going?" "We're going to Nina and Maria's." Daria stared at him for a few seconds, then got into the car and hugged her father. "Dad, this is the right thing to do." Nina prepared the tea, put the cookies on the table. "Maria, the tea is ready." The daughter went into the kitchen and sat down on the sofa. "Mom, I really don't want tea." "Maria, you have to eat well, and now you don't eat anything." Maria picked up the cup and took a sip. "Mom, when do you think Daria and I will see each other again?" Nina was confused. She wasn't ready to answer those questions now because her soul was bleeding. "I don't know, my child. There are some circumstances. These circumstances are you and Anthony." Nina was embarrassed. "No, of course not. It's just that life is a very complicated thing." "Mom, life is complicated, of course. But I think adults like to complicate things even when they're simple. We saw that something was going on between you, and you pretended it wasn't so." Nina stroked Maria's head. "Daughter, when you grow up, you will understand. Anthony is the mayor. He's in the public eye. He's a different kind of person, if you can call him that. His family is on TV a lot. You and I are so different. Such different people, anyway. There can't be anything in common." "Mom, that's not right. It's people that matter, not where they work." Nina didn't have time to answer because the doorbell rang. "Mom, I'll get it." Nina nodded. She got up and looked out the window. How strange. They had the same car as Anthony's in their yard. She hadn't seen it before. Maybe it's not our head. Oh, those chimeras. "Hello, Nina." The woman shuddered. Slowly, she turned around. Anthony was standing next to her. "Nina, I couldn't follow you. Marry me. We'll have 2 daughters and the happiest life in the world." Nina couldn't say anything. She looked at Anthony and tears ran down her cheeks. Then he held her tightly against him. "That's it. Say no more. 2 hours to pack. We'll figure out the rest later." Vanessa dialed Anthony's number for the umpteenth time. She hated it when the mayor was out of sight. Of course, she had no right to control him, but every time he disappeared for even an hour, she thought it was from another woman who could pose a danger to her Vanessa. Finally, Anthony picked up the phone. For a few seconds, Vanessa heard rustling sounds. Then Anthony finally said hello. "Vanessa, is something wrong?" "No, but I need to know where you are." "What if something is wrong?" Vanessa listened clearly to every sound coming through the phone. "I'm in the city, Vanessa. I'm at the door of the registry office." Apparently, Vanessa's voice changed because Anthony was quick to say, "Vanessa, of course, you'll be the guest of honor at my wedding." Vanessa threw the phone on the floor. She was on the verge of tears. She had been preparing for many years for Anthony to take her to the registry office. 2 months later, the governor himself visited her town. The occasion was important. The mayor of the city was getting married. The occasion was grand. And when Anthony told Stephen that he and Nina didn't want a lavish celebration, Stephen was outraged. And there's more. It's not every day a mayor gets married, much less a good mayor. Nina was. Anthony looked at her with a kind of mute astonishment. He had seen before that Nina was beautiful, but now he realized that he had never met a prettier woman. Next to them were Maria and Daria. They wore the same lush dresses, and people whispered. No one could understand how people who were about to get married could have girls who looked like 2 peas in a pod. "I now pronounce you man and wife." The words sounded so solemn that even Vanessa could barely hold back tears and immediately held out a handkerchief. Deputy Mayor Vanessa looked at him in surprise. She had only recently come to work for them. And if Vanessa wasn't mistaken, he was single. She smiled. "Thank you so much. You are so kind. You have to be so happy for strangers." Vanessa smiled in satisfaction. "It can't be. Can strangers be strangers working together?" The man reached out for her elbow, and Vanessa didn't hesitate to put her hand on his. There must have been so much happiness in Anthony's new family that there was enough for everyone around them.